All right. I'm going live early a little bit because I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm going to have to upgrade StreamYard to like a paid version. I'm just kind of experimenting with the free version. So I don't know. I might have to leave and come back if I can't get Garrett on. Oh, I can just text him. Let's see. I heard something. Oh, that's not the right thing. All right. Let's send some text. Or vice versa. See, I'm not sure if we're supposed to link up. Hey, what's up? What's up, Brown? You on the water? That's cool, man. Like I said, boys, I'm not sure if this is going to be. I don't know if I can get this to link up. If he's supposed to go live behind the scenes, because that's how this normally works. But I don't have the paid version of StreamYard yet. So I sent Garrett the link, and now I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens. I don't know if I have to end this stream or start it over, or I don't know. Yeah, Brown, do you know how this works, man? Of course I need some help. So I sent him a link to come into the live, but I don't know if we're supposed to link up before I go live or after I go live, because I clicked guests and it said to set up the green room that I have to pay for it, which if I'd have known that, I'd have just paid for it. Yeah, man, give me a holler. Come phone right here. Got Brown Bait Company to the rescue. Need kids to help us, man. Us old dudes are just lost at it. Give Garrett a few minutes. Maybe he'll figure. Oh, there's Brendan there.
Brendan
Let's see what Brendan's up to. Hey, man, what's up? Yeah, just trying to get hooked up, and I'm bad at it. Yes. Okay. Oh, it'll do both things? Okay. Okay. Oh, here he comes. Here he comes right now. I can see him coming in. All right. Got it, man. I appreciate the help. Later, man. All right. I see him kind of add to stage. There he is.
What's going on?
Hey, man. I'm well, shout out to Brown Bait Company for helping me out with the technical difficulties that I experience as an older gentleman dealing with the internet.
Oh, it's not just you, man. I have those every time.
I mean, it is usually like this is my first time being on this end of this whole situation. Usually I am where you're sitting. People are interviewing me, so I've never done this way before. And,
yeah, well, I haven't been on too many live shows or anything like that. I've done presentations for people, but that's
yeah. YouTube likes the live, and
okay.
I'm trying to build up those viewer hours to be paid, to be monetized on there, And so far, the fastest for me is going live. I think people like the interaction. You get a kind of a core group of guys that come in and hang out with you almost every time. I've been inconsistent at doing it a certain day at a certain time.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. Speaking of folks coming in, there's John, my man John. That's what I like about this. You can highlight comments on there. When you
Okay.
go through StreamYard, I just literally just click that, and anything that I want to highlight, it just goes up right there. And that's cool. It's easy
Oh,
for a 50-year-old dude to use,
yeah. Yeah. And I just figured out how I can actually see
Oh,
the
you can see the
comment.
comments? There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I
I clicked that.
okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you should be able to see comments. And we're not going to have too many. I mean, we've got 10 on here right now, and maybe we'll get to 20. My live things aren't, huge at the moment over here. And there is a way that you can go live on Instagram too, but
Right.
kind of on
Yeah.
strike over there,
Why is that?
just jerking around. They
You
dangle
have a big
carrots.
following over there, though.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't want to lose anybody or disappoint anyone, but I'm kind of separating the platforms out for what they're useful for. And for me, just straight up just advertising stuff, like this. I
Right.
posted about today, talk about the electrofishing jobs coming up and use it for advertising. Um, for me, Instagram has been a 4-year journey. I was on Instagram before the 4-year mark, but doing photography stuff. But it's always been kind of dangling that, oh, we're going to pay you. You're going to get paid. You're going to make money one day. And it's like, I should have been on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. There's people that make a lot of money on YouTube, but
And
I'm
that's, you're exactly right. There's a lot of people make a lot of money on YouTube. And that's brings up the first idea that I want to talk about before we even talk about shocking or any fishery stuff, is just talking about content. And I think I think we're both sitting on an absolute content gold mine with
yeah, I would agree with that. We have
small,
a cool
yeah,
job,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah. What are your ideas? I mean, you jumped on that. Go for it. What do you think about that?
I mean, we're doing it mostly through Facebook. That seems to be where we're getting a lot of engagement right now. We want to branch out into YouTube and some other platforms. My boss operates TikTok. I'm not a TikTok person. I don't have the app on my phone, but he's gotten decent viewership through TikTok too. It's just taking the time to actually record the content, rather than just going out to a job and doing it. I have a problem of I get there, I just get to work and I do it. And then I'm like, man, this would have made, I could have got some good videos out of this or good before and after pictures. I'll leave and I'm like, man, I should have took a picture before I did that, and come back and then all the plants are dead, or, whatever you're doing, you've already finished it. And it's like, we should have took the extra 30 minutes to get some good videos.
Yep, yep. I'm familiar with that. Very familiar with that. I'm struggling through that right now. We talked about that on the phone a little bit, just about doing electrofishing jobs and not having to operate the boat and the cameras.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
That's two different jobs.
Yeah, you can see some pictures we have, like, on our Facebook and stuff, where Dustin's the owner of Pristine Pond Solutions. He's driving the shock boat while we're doing some sampling on a pretty big lake, and you can see him looking down. It's because he's trying to fly the drone and drive us at the same time, and
Right,
it's not really feasible. You need someone out there to get good videos while someone else is driving. Otherwise,
right,
it looks choppy because you're like, "Why are they driving the boat like that?" It's like, well, he's trying to fly a drone and pay attention to what he's doing and watch what we're doing at the same time. And it's
right.
hard to do.
Well, I've got a piece of equipment that I wanna tell you about. Have you seen a 360 camera?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, dude, we're gonna use that. So,
Okay.
what we'll do, it records, how, like, you go on Facebook and and somebody goes to, like, Rome, and they take one of those 360 pictures, and you can
Yeah, you
move
can
the
like scroll
camera and
through.
videos like that,
Okay.
okay? So, I've got that camera, and it can go onto, like, a telescoping pole. So you can put it above the boat like a drone, but it's not
Okay.
actually a drone, right? But the
Right.
benefit to the 360 is when you turn it on and start your shocking job, it's not going to matter where the action is. you know, because you know how it comes up and the camera's never pointed in the right direction for the
Right.
action. You'll be going back through the 360, telling the camera to look here for when the fish comes up over here, and then scrolling it back over and telling it to look over there. You can get in and edit it literally 360 degrees. And
That's pretty cool.
yeah, dude, it is a lifesaver. I've used that on several different, and the really nice part about it is too, is the one I use is called Insta 360. I
Okay.
take in some of my videos that I made just on fishing trips and stuff
Mhm.
and put it into their software, because you don't download any of that stuff. You edit on the phone and then just pull out the video that you want, because it would be huge to download a 360 video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
can see how that would be
it's
complicated.
convenient that way, but also too, you can just take your videos, put them in the computer, and tell it AI edit that thing, and AI will throw you 20 different edits of everything you shot that day.
Nice. So we
Yeah.
could put that on the like the bow of the boat, attach it to basically like our railing and then just have it sitting in the middle and hope people don't bump it when they're netting fish, basically.
Yeah, the bird's eye view, I think, is like you said, you're trying to drive the boat and fly the drone. I would scrap that idea for a 360 camera on a 9-foot pole. Now you're
Yeah.
looking off the front of the boat. You can see what's coming up. You can scroll it back. You can bring it down level. You know, when you bring the fish in to work the fish up, you know, you can just bring that camera down towards at your level. Then I'm out. I just stick mine in a rod holder in on the center console. You know.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good idea. It's a lot better because if you're flying a drone, you have to have someone on land flying the drone. You can't be on the boat trying to fly the drone. It
It's
doesn't work that
the
way.
whole thing about a drone too, if your experience with it is like mine, it's an entire insurance nightmare waiting to hit somebody in the head. Um, you know, not to mention a $1,500 piece of equipment you don't want in the water. It doesn't
Yeah.
register the surface of the water all that great most of the time anyway. So you start getting that action. You know what I'm saying? Where your $2,000 piece of equipment's deciding to dip 3 feet towards the surface of the water for no reason.
Yeah, that would not be good. Usually when I fly the drone, most of the time it's okay, I need an aerial picture so we can come up with like a habitat plan or vegetation control. Like we're just getting pictures to identify it. I'm not the one that videoed the drone or took drone videos while we were electrofishing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if Dustin wants to be the one to crash the drone,
There you
he
go.
bought the drone, that's fine. I'm not going to be the one to crash the drone.
Yeah, man, I've crashed so many. I crash
Yeah.
them. I might as well take it out of the box and just fly it right into the wall right when I buy it. Just boom, just give it the old endurance contest
Except you see
immediately.
how durable it is. Send it
Exactly.
back like, "Nope, this one ain't gonna work for me. I crashed too much. I need a heavy duty drone."
Exactly. All right, enough nerdy tech stuff. Let's go to talk about fisheries.
Like, that's not nerdy too, but,
I know, right? Where all the cool guys hang out at the fisheries
Yeah,
department. So when was the first time you ever heard of fisheries or fisheries management?
probably like that the private sector existed was probably freshman year of college. I was actually already in college when I learned more about what it was and what you could do. Because like through middle school, high school, my plan was engineering. I was going to go to A&M and be a engineer, mechanical, chemical engineer. And then I found out that you can go to school for like fish and wildlife, and I was like, man, that sounds a whole lot better than sitting behind a computer doing math all day. I mean, I liked math, don't get me wrong, but I liked being outside a whole lot better. So my original plan when I went to A&M was to, go graduate, work for Texas Parks and Wildlife like everybody else. And then I actually met Bob Lusk and learned a little bit more about what the private sector was. So then I started doing my own research and I was like, well, that sounds like a lot more fun. I had a little bit of experience in the state sector. A lot of people like state jobs, and I'm not saying that they're bad. It just
Mhm.
wasn't for me. I worked for
I saw an
Extension
article on,
for a
yeah,
while.
I saw the article on extension where they announced you as an extension agent, right,
Yeah.
in Texas?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was I was the pond management program specialist, so I had to teach people how to manage their own ponds. And it's a good job, that it pays decent and you have good
Oh, yeah.
retirement, good benefits, but I didn't like being 9 to 5 behind a desk. That's just not
Yeah.
who I was. So I did it for half a year and I was like, okay, this is not for me. I got a
Mhm.
good opportunity with Pristine Pond Solutions through
Mm.
Dustin and took it and ran with it. And I don't I don't regret it at
Mm.
all. It's been a lot of fun being on the water every day. Now, I don't want to be on the water today. It's too cold for that. I see a lot of people in the comments talking about -5, -6. We're
Yeah.
at like 30 degrees here, and that's cold enough for me. I can't imagine being up north.
Oh man, it's brutal, and they don't even have like bass. There's like a bass season up there. My guy
Yeah.
Frank is in Canada up there, so they get like ticketed if they're trying to catch bass certain times of the year. I guess not
Yep.
me,
No,
man.
it's almost 70 year round here in Texas. I mean, not really. We get cold fronts, but like it'll be back to almost 70 on Thursday. So I
Yeah,
can go
yeah.
bass fishing at the end of the week.
What
Freeze in
part
the
of Texas
beginning.
are you in now?
I'm in College Station, Texas, so
College
central
Station.
central
Yeah.
Texas. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm familiar with College Station. That brings up there's a lot of Texas lakes that are throwing off some fish. But before I go down that road, we'll save that for the end. Electrofishing. When was the first time you ever got on an electrofishing boat?
My freshman year of college, I joined the American Fisheries Society at Texas A&M. It's like a student chapter. They have national chapters and everything. And the professor that ran that, Dr. Josh Perkin, I'll give him a shout out on here for anyone that's looking to go to A&M. That's a good group to join because you get a lot of hands-on field experience. And one of the first things we did was electrofishing. So we got introduced to that pretty early on. And I was like, this is a fun way to catch fish. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that's my first experience with it, and then I did it a couple times a year throughout college, and now I do it every day. Well, not every day, but I do it a
Yeah.
lot more.
As much as you can. That's you're
Yeah.
lucky in that. I think about guys and how they make their career choices that colleagues of mine. And a big part of me doing what I did, because, as you know, as a private pond manager, you're not going around running electrofishing surveys making a living. Those are
No.
the whipped cream, you know.
Yeah, those are the ones that are fun to do, but
Those
yeah,
are the
you're not
fun days at
making
work.
millions
You're
doing
you're
that.
spraying and you're raking and you're weeding and whatever it is, the water testing. I mean, there's a dredging, sediment surveys. There are a million unfun things you can do in private lake and pond management that actually pay your bills. And I think part on my page, I left all that out.
Yeah.
Who wants to watch any of that? Does anybody want to take 30 minutes and watch a sediment survey?
No.
No,
No, they don't.
I don't
And people might wanna watch dredging at the beginning because it's cool, but I promise you, you don't wanna be involved in dredging. It
know you
sucks.
don't. It,
We do it, we don't like to do it, but we do it sometimes.
I noticed you guys have a truck, sir.
Yeah, so those are Dustin's toys. I'm about to learn how to drive those
Yeah,
more. We've
yeah.
got a really big
Don't force
contract.
it. You'll snap the head. Trust me on that. I speak from experience.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and we
Yeah,
actually sell trucksters now, so if
you
anyone
do.
wants to buy one, yeah, Truckster Gear USA, we're a dealer
Okay.
for
They're great
trucksters.
pieces of equipment, man. I've worked, the guy that bought my company, it's going on 10 years ago now, had one of those. They were out of Chicago. So there was a lot of more of you don't use that much in around Atlanta, but certain
Right.
areas of the country, certain pieces of equipment, certain things are different. And that mechanical machine, the removal machine, was pretty impressive. It does a good
Yeah,
job.
the trucksters are definitely the best
They
mechanical
are.
harvester that you can get,
Hmm.
and it works good. We have a lot of clients that well, some people don't wanna use chemicals, and I get it, that's totally fine.
Sure.
Your truckster won't solve your problem long term. It's gonna be more like a lawnmower depending on what you're dealing with. But the ability to remove biomass after spraying, before spraying, to allow you that pairing with being able to spray and mechanically harvest allows us to be a lot more dynamic than a lot of other people. And we
Hmm.
can create solutions long term that way. Nutrient loading, people deal with plants a lot, but they don't realize, the reason you have plants is because you have nutrients and sunlight, et cetera. So if you can get
Hmm.
rid of those nutrients, now you
Hmm.
slow your plant growth. So solving the problem is more of the goal there. And that's by pairing those two, we do a pretty good job at that. So
Yeah, I think to clarify, so because some people are young here, might not understand that completely. So if you get into a situation where you're spraying plants, yes, you'll kill the plant, But what ends up happening is the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the nutrients in the plant cycle back into the water and just create either the same problem with the same plant or a bigger problem with a different plant. So
Exactly.
what Garrett's talking about is physically removing the plant from the water with the machine. Now you physically remove the nutrients along with it, and you're reducing that nutrient cycling. And that's really smart. Very good.
Yeah. And it helps. Plus, for plants like cattails or bulrush, you have to wait months for them to rot anyway. It's a
Might as
lot
well just cut
nicer
them
to
out.
just
Yeah.
get rid of them.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's good, man. I like those ideas. A lot of times you just kind of see companies that are I just spray and go,
Yeah.
It's just
And
nozzle
you can make a lot of money doing that. I
head.
won't say that you can't,
Mm-mm.
but you know,
No, there's nothing
it
illegal
shouldn't.
about it. There's nothing,
Yeah,
there's nothing technically wrong with it other than the fact that I just think I
a
agree with
better
you.
way.
There's
Yeah.
smarter ways more environmentally friendly ways you can do it. And instead of cost effective ways of doing it,
Right. Exactly. Well, and
um,
I mean, if you're spending a little bit more money up front, but you're solving your problem for longer, then it's probably worth the initial investment, versus just, it is cheaper to spray than to run the trucks or absolutely. But if you do both, then you can make your results last a lot longer. So it's cheaper in the long run versus just spraying over and over and over again. But
going back.
that's the money maker of the business, but plants are a lot less fun than fish. I'll say that.
Oh
My
yeah,
personal opinion.
that's how I made a living too, man. Just a lot of in Metro Atlanta area, it was a lot of filamentous algae control and a lot of just straight up just trash removal. From the stormwater systems. I'm seeing all kinds of new like net type systems that go on culvert pipes. People are engineering things that can just literally capture the trash as it comes into the system. And I think that's all really smart.
You
Just
just have to
getting,
be able to clean those nets frequently, because what's
I
going to
know,
happen is
right?
they're going to stop and they're going to clog up the
And
system.
then they're gonna exactly.
Yeah,
I never had anything fancy like that. Just a John boat and a dip net and some, maybe some day help to help go drag all that stuff out. And again, another perfect example of, oh, you manage lakes for a living. Boy, that's a job I would love to have. Oh yeah. Let's do a
yeah,
week on a 90-degree boat, 90-degree day, 100-degree boat, picking up trash 8 hours a day. Let's just go pick up 14 tons of trash in a few months and see how you think about lake management.
yeah. Thankfully, we don't deal with as many rural. We're not strictly urban. We're a lot of rural people too. Out in Texas, there's a lot of wide open, and Louisiana too. It's a lot of wide open land.
Yeah.
So we don't deal with as much trash cleanup, but we definitely do our fair share of trash cleanup. And you see some pretty disgusting stuff in water.
You
Like,
do. You do.
yeah, some of it, it's just like, wow, I wouldn't have
You wouldn't even believe it.
expected to find. Yeah, yeah. Like you wouldn't believe it if we told you what we had to take out of that city park pond. It would blow your mind.
Yeah. Yep. I know exactly what you mean. I've had so many crazy things that I've had to do to lakes and ponds over the years that you just wouldn't believe was even happening. Um, but it's just the nature of the game. And I like coming
Yeah,
on here and talking to younger guys who are in the business, helping them out. I've got several, young professional types that, because everybody's college experiences is a lot different. Yours sounded very familiar to mine, where the guy who was teaching the class was, he was entrenched. He was there. He wasn't a new teacher or anything like that. He had been doing it a long time. He had all the hookups. We had a lot of ponds that we could go to and, actually electrofish,
right. Yeah,
you know. Um, Dr. Gilbert was his name, Ronnie Gilbert. And he died recently. It was sad, but he's a real old guy. So, he lived a long life, but it's still, you can't replace a guy like Ronnie. He had so much pond management, experience and years as a professor,
right.
and I owe everything the entire page and everything, all of this that's happened, I owe to Ronnie. Without his help, managing those, I saw pond management, and then I went and got onto the shock rig. Like you, I was in college. I had no idea what fish. I fished my whole life, but I had no idea there was even such a thing as a fish biologist. And as soon as I saw the guy, just like you, I was like, man, I'm doing that. And then as soon as I saw the shock rig, the first class that I took was that fall when I transferred. I was in college a few years down at Valdosta, but I transferred to UGA. And when first class I took was pond management in the forestry school with Dr. Gilbert. And that was it. I knew. And then I knew kind of like I had an idea how to start the business too. I was a lifeguard working for a pool company, and the pool company actually had three different neighborhood association pools that I worked at. All three of them had ponds in the community that I was already working with the president with, at the homeowners association. So I just told him, I'll be doing a job like this job, except for ponds, when I get out of college. And I just started working right then.
Yeah, they probably were like, "Oh, really? You can help these ponds out? Good. That's what we need."
Yeah, that's
And
exactly how I did it. Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy how many people don't or have never heard of pond management. I mean, I was one of them. I grew up in a small town. I went hunting and fishing all the time. That's what we did for fun, and I had never heard of it before. I was just like you. I went to college, found out a little bit more about it. I actually worked at the aquaculture facility at A&M for 3.5 years too
Oh,
in my
nice.
undergrad. So I
Yeah.
got a lot of experience handling fish, growing fish. And the professor that I worked under, he was the pond management specialist for extension. So I
Yeah.
got exposed through him as
Buddy.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Extension
it,
service is great. After I was reading about you on that, I thought, oh, he's an extension agent. How's he doing private and extension? But now it makes sense.
yeah, they don't let you do that.
No, I usually don't. But I noticed on there that the TAMU, Texas A&M extension page is awesome. I kind of
Yeah,
fell
they
down
have a
that rabbit
lot.
hole for about. There's a lot of information on there. So go. I'll try to copy it, the link in the description of this after this is over with. That'd be a good
Yeah,
reference for extension. I wish more people knew about the extension service.
yeah, no,
Um,
it's great, especially if you're not blessed with as much money as some of the people that we deal with are. You know, if you're trying to
yeah,
figure out how to do stuff on your own, there's a lot of resources out there that can educate you on what to do. And then the
yeah,
Aquaplant website is probably the number one aquatic vegetation management website
yeah.
out there.
It was
I know a lot
awesome.
of people that use it that are in our industry.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's
I
a great
would.
resource.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I've done some. My friend of mine from college, my old roommate from college, he's the head of the fisheries part of the extension service in Georgia. His name's Stephen Patrick. He's usually on here. He might be. I don't know. Shout out to Stephen if he is. But we've worked together for years, just kind of shared information, and I've always been affiliated with the extension service, University of Georgia extension service. Did some speeches and took the electrofishing rig over. Did some, they'd have like a pond day, and teach classes and stuff, and I'd go over there and do that stuff. And I think it's important. And the most really what drives me in doing everything that I'm doing is it seems about like 15 minutes ago, I was your age going out into the world and, going to go manage ponds and build a business. It doesn't take long to get to 50, my friend. Trust me.
Yeah, I know.
And the problems the biggest thing that I see is kind of what we've already talked about. You are electrofishing ponds and you're seeing the exact same results over and over and over. Am I wrong?
Yeah,
They're
no, it's the
just
same
a couple.
story
It's
every
like a
time.
form. You could just hand everybody a form letter on what's wrong with it. Maybe you got like 2 different form letters, maybe 3, but
Yeah,
there's no variability in the ponds anymore. They're all crowded with predators, they're just
yeah.
stunted.
Well, when you talk to the landowner, you'll know right away about what you're about to get into. They're like, "Oh yeah, I haven't I haven't managed it in 5 years, 7 years, or, oh yeah, well, you catch and release, or, whatever it may be. Or people that
Yeah,
buy a new pond and like, yeah, the landowner couldn't tell me much about it. They haven't really messed with it. And it's like, well, I'm not going to get too excited because I know what I'm about to get into. So
right.
every now and
And
then you might get one big fish, but
yeah,
maybe it's usually not.
no, usually not. I know. And there's so much, like kind of misinformation around that in itself. But the point that I was making, is trying to make, is that all the exact same things that you're looking at are the things that I was looking at in 1995.
Yeah, it hasn't
Nothing has
changed. Probably
changed.
gotten worse.
Actually, it has. It's just worse than it was back then. And that's what I'm trying to fight. So there's not another guy like us who has to go another entire lifetime on this misinformation nonsense that's floating around. Because for 30 years I took electrofishing boats and went and measured the fish that I caught. That's the difference. Like these guys, they want to approach you on the internet with this groupthink nonsense that everybody regurgitates in the echo chamber. Like that's going to matter. Just because a bunch of people say something doesn't make it true.
Yeah,
You
usually
know.
it's not true. It usually gets distorted somewhere down the line, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's what drives me the most, is that you're dealing with the exact same problems that I'm dealing with, and I don't want those problems to exist. Because the thing about it is, those problems are solvable problems.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
Well, I
know, in
mean,
small bodies of water.
yeah, when it's getting worse because people don't eat fish as much anymore. They don't. I don't know, there's this thing that a lot of people think bass don't taste good, and I don't really get that. I know fried, all fish is pretty much good, so, if you have to cook it a different way, do it, but you gotta do something with them. But most people, yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, when you were doing it, more people probably caught and ate fish from their ponds. Now, not so much. Everyone thinks they're saving the bass by not, or
Mm-hmm.
helping them by not eating them. It's like, yeah,
And
no.
it's the opposite now. But I'm serious though. It doesn't take long. How many ponds have you seen ponds that you stocked and then made recommendations for, and then the guy doesn't listen and then they stunt? Are you there yet?
Yeah, well, we've had recommend people just not listen to recommendations in general. I
Yeah.
mean, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
we're most of the ones, if we're stocking it right away, they have us manage it all the way through.
Right.
We'll get one-offs where we'll stock it, and then they're like, "Okay, we got it from here." But
Yeah.
a lot of those, they don't care as much about what the fish look like, they just want fish in there.
Right.
So we haven't run into many people yet that are like, "We want trophy bass. We want you to stock it for us, and then, we'll kinda take it from there."
Yeah.
We're getting a
Yeah.
lot of new ones this year that are like, "We want trophy bass, but we want you to make sure that it happens," kinda thing.
Right. Those are the
And
best
you
ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
usually what I've found is most of those, they have a better understanding of what it takes to get trophy bass and that they need to harvest fish. A lot of the ones that are really interested and they actually want your help managing it have done their own research, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting because you would think, more people that want to do it on their own do their own research, but it's not really true. Most of the time, it's the ones that are like, I want you to help me get to where I need to be, and they already have more of a background knowledge on how to grow fish. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
ones that don't want to listen to you don't have the background knowledge and that, but somehow think that they're right no matter what.
I know, it's funny. It's like, it depends on what you call research. So when
Yeah,
people
well, that's
did your research, did you go to the Texas A&M site that we just recommended, and did you read all the articles, or at least 50% of the articles on the Texas A&M extension site about all the actual research that's been done? Or did you go to Facebook dot whatever g- pond group and listen to what everybody's opinions?
oh
Because
man,
that's
don't get
not
me started
research.
on pond
Yeah.
groups.
Mm.
Those are chaotic.
Brutal. I stay
Yeah.
out of them because it's just like, give me a break, man. I'm
I
not gonna
try
come down
to.
there and tell you how to do your job.
No, I try to, but it's sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, "Oh, man, someone's gonna listen to that. I have to say something." Some of it's just so far out there that I don't know where people get their information from. I saw this question that you just tagged. I forget
Yeah,
the
well, you wanna tackle that?
Yeah, I can. So culling bluegill kind of depends on your goals. If you're trying to grow big bass, you typically don't need to cull bluegill because those are your main forage base. A lot of people, if they don't want really big bluegill, like that are larger than the bass that you have in your lake can consume, so you're talking like 12, 14-inch bluegill, you can cull those bigger bluegill to make room for smaller ones that are, more forage sized. But in general, if you're trying to grow trophy bass, your bluegill is your forage base. So you don't need to cull any of those because your bass are handling that problem. But if you're trying to grow big bluegill, then you do need to cull bluegill because you need to make room. It's the same concept. You just flip, you just reverse the roles. So if you're trying to grow trophy bluegill, you got to cull big bass so that your bluegill can keep growing, and you got to cull bluegill to make room in that forage base. Your aquatic insects, you need to be able to have more of those available for your bluegill to grow. So, and that might have been a little complicated, but in general, you don't need to cull bluegill in a bass bluegill pond where you're trying to grow big bass. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, oh, no, you nailed it. And you struggle the way I struggle and trying to articulate something very complex that's multifaceted. It sounds like a
Yeah.
simple question, but it's really not. You
No.
know, it's a very complex question, and you get a lot of that in fisheries where the oversimplification of something, like to oversimplify something, you have to make a lot of assumptions,
Right.
right? And it's those assumptions that you're missing that make it seem simple. When you go back and take those assumptions out and go, hey, well, you assume this, you assume this, you assume this. And now you see the complexity of what you just asked.
Exactly. Like you can cull giant bluegill out of your lake if you want to, because a lot of your bass aren't eating them. But it depends on the situation because you may need to leave some of those in there. It all varies pond to pond. And most people like me, if you have a really big bluegill in your lake, they're just fun to catch and cool to look at. So you want to leave them in there anyway. I mean, all they're doing is creating more fry every year. So, they're not really hurting much. People argue that back and forth, but you're not going to have enough giant bluegill to cause a problem. I've never seen it anyway.
Nah, I've never seen it either. I think where you're running into problems with bluegill is when the only time I've ever seen it is they either straight up just did not stock any bass for whatever idiotic
Yeah,
reason. They couldn't read. And they were just like, no, I just wanted bluegill in there. So I just put bluegill in there. And now they all are dead, stunted and look like crap. I've seen that a few times. Or for whatever reason, you lose the bass population.
right.
Green sunfish, crappie a couple times. And then sometimes you'll see the sunfish populations just overwhelmingly, take back over again. But again, I can count the numbers of ponds in a 30-year career I've seen like that on one hand.
Yeah, I've never seen a bluegill crowded pond. I mean, so like what you explained where bluegill get out of control, it's because there's no predator present. So if,
Correct.
people are asking about a bass bluegill pond, usually you're not running into problems with bluegill unless you stocked it bad from the beginning. But even then, usually you don't see bluegill issues. Now
Not
you'll have
you.
people argue with you that bluegill are evil because they spawn too much, but whatever. You can't win them all. I just
Well, it goes back to like one of the guys that follows me over on Facebook. Shout out to Derry Stockbridge. He's probably not on here, but Derry, he's a generation and older than me. Like my dad's age. Maybe not quite my dad, but up. And he was a pond manager in the Atlanta area starting in the 70s. So when I got out of school, I was very fortunate in that, much like we're having a conversation together now, you've seen it too, I'm sure, with other pond guys or guys that are colleagues of yours. Some guys you're not ever going to work with
no.
because there's too much competition things going on
Yeah.
there, right? I don't see that at all in this business. I'm not competitive with anyone in this business. I feel like if you're willing to work, there's plenty of work for you. Usually, you can find it,
Yeah,
and the
there's
more,
plenty of things to go
yeah,
around.
yeah, there's plenty of work. I think that, like we've already stated, in this business, it's people even knowing they can call you to get you to do the work.
Yeah,
Still, you know, there's still people who are like, like, can you imagine what this business would be like if you're like the toilet breaks, you call the plumber, the switch breaks, you call the electrician, the pond breaks, hey, you call the pond man.
yeah,
People don't
exactly.
know that. Yeah.
No, most people don't, and it's crazy. I think they estimate now 1.4 million ponds in Texas, and they think
Oh
like
yeah.
75% of them aren't managed. Now, some of that is because people don't wanna manage them or, don't have the funds to do so, but a lot of it is because people don't know about it. I
Yeah.
remember when I started doing this, going back to my hometown and people asking me what I do, and I explained it to them, and they're like, "Man, that's a great idea. There's ponds everywhere." But they had never
Mhm.
heard of it before. They were like, "That's your job? You do that for a living?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
insane.
And everywhere I've gone for 30 years and everything I've done, and there's still most people have never heard of it. Not one. I've run into people all the time who are like, "You do what?"
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
never heard of it. So, I think there's a lot of room for growth. And touching on what we were talking about before about content wise, man, like I'm coming into year 3 on Sugar Hill, right? We're bringing the electrofishing boat out this year. We're
Yeah, that's
gonna
gonna be
we're
fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that one. I'm looking forward to having another biologist do the work. I don't wanna have any I've done this stuff online long enough to know that people are gonna call me a liar when they see the results. So having somebody else go over there and go, "No, man, this is what he did," and having 25,000 live people watch you do it live doesn't hurt either, you know?
No, exactly.
Yeah, so for all those reasons, I like having the shock boat in there this year. But the main point is the content, and the content is there will never be another year 3 for Sugar Hill. You
Right.
know, it's a one-off deal. Next year, year 4, year 5, year 6, point being is the content is always different. I
Yeah.
never have a content issue ever. Even if
Yeah,
that's the
well,
only pond that I ever post about, my content is unique and new every single time I go. That's not how it's gonna work, and I already see it on YouTube and these other platforms where the fishing pages. How many different ways can you rig a Texas rig?
right.
How many different videos can you make about bass fishing before it starts getting stagnant? That's where I see we have a huge advantage because we'll always have the bass fishing in our ponds.
Right. Well, and your management changes constantly. Your environment, your ecosystem will never be the same. And then,
Mm-mm.
as the years progress, your fisheries management strategy changes. And I don't think a lot of people understand that either. So it's one thing to give people advice on, we get questions a lot. Well, how many bass do I cull? And it's like, well, for one, without seeing the pond, I can't really answer that question for you. I can give you what the average range usually is, but then it also changes year to year. So you know, and most people also don't realize that the most productive years of a lake are like the first 5 to 7. So they're like, well, it's a young lake, so the bass aren't big yet. And it's like, yeah, but as it gets older, that usually gets worse. That's why you
Yeah,
get new ponds, people stock them, even if they stock them wrong, they still end up with one or two big fish because that fish just outcompeted all the other ones. But yeah, so there's a lot of information that needs to go out there that's hard to put out there, like you said, because when you generalize, you can only make so many assumptions. Otherwise, people are going to go, well, this is what he told me, but it didn't
yep,
work in my pond. It's like, well, yeah,
yeah.
I figured it wouldn't.
Drew's got another question coming through here. Let's throw it up there and just tackle that. Um, getting two. I'm not sure I understand that question. Sorry, Drew. We are right now. I'll just call it what it is. We have Floridas and Northerns in the same pond, and did that. I had an opportunity to do that, so I did that intentionally because of all of the nonsensical misinformation that I've seen around bass genetics and what genetics that you need to stock. and just all the conversations around that literally do not resemble anything that I've ever observed in the field for 30 years. Those are the conversations that I want to have. And actually nothing has happened in this pond that I stocked in Georgia, where I've managed ponds for a long time, is doing any different in this pond. The Florida bass aren't growing as fast as the Northerns, and they're both growing pretty well. I mean, I've got Florida bass at the 2.5 pound range after the end of their second growing season. So we've got over a pound of growth per season on the Florida bass, right? That's not a bad growth rate for a bass. Like, kind of just generally speaking, if you go out in the world and ask people, how fast should a bass grow? Most people will probably tell you about a pound a year if they know anything about this stuff. What they'll never tell you is they don't understand it can stop growing. They don't understand stunning at all. We've proven that online. That stunted part is up here for them, but we at least know that people understand that the bass can grow in the right situations. But that being said, we have the Floridas and the Northerns in the same pond in Georgia, and they're growing at completely different rates, because some of our Northerns are over 4 pounds and grew over 2 pounds per season. We had some 4.1, 4.2 pound fish. Okay. So does that mean if Garrett takes them and stocks them in a 2.5 acre pond in Texas, he's going to get the same results? No. But those are the results that I got in Northeast Georgia, with the water quality parameters, with the weather patterns, with everything that happened over the last 24, 36 months to create that amount of fish growth. That is the results that we actually saw. And that is the world that I want to exist in, not the land of hypothetical kind of echo chamber jargon that goes back and forth online all the time. Well, if you do this, this happens. No, no, let's exist in the real world. Let's exist on this project and the next one and the next one, and discuss the things that are actually happening, and not this hypothetical nonsense that just ends up devolving into basically arguments over nothing.
Right. Well, and the other thing I think people don't understand is, like, if we took those fish out of the Sugar Hills Outdoors pond and moved them to a different pond, the fish that were excelling in Sugar Hill Outdoors would maybe not be the same. Like your 4 pound largemouth that you got, those Northern strain, if we moved them, it might be the 3 pounder now that outgrows that 4 pounder. Because, and I think people think, okay, genetics apply equally. So if you have, if you pay for fish that are supposed to have way better genetics than these other ones, but you put them in an environment that the genetics they have don't perform as well in, they may not perform like they are advertised to.
Right.
Like, you can't predict. You can do everything you want selective breeding wise to get the best genetics and give them the best chance at being big, but you can't accurately predict that they will do well in a certain environment. Some fish are always going to outperform the others. And if you move them to somewhere else, those fish that were outperforming the others may perform worse in a different environment. So you can't.
I've witnessed that many times, actually. You've probably seen it too, but I've taken fish from ponds that were decent ponds. But again, I need to cull, like you said, culling is part of pond management. So on my ponds that were balanced properly, I still had some culling duties to do. I was still watching relative weights. I was still watching those smaller size fish. And I would think, all right, Lord, we're going to run the shock rig and we're going to take the fish for this guy. He's paying me to do it, So I did it for him. Well, occasionally I would have ponds that would need some adult bass that, maybe the crappie disrupted it. They're 30, 40, 50 acres in size. And there's, as really no way to go get 1 to 2 pound bass cost effectively from a fish hatchery. They're terribly expensive.
Yeah.
So when I had the shock boat, when I had my whole business going, when I was doing all those things, and I did have a client that needed a few bass, I would take those bass over there to them. And just like you said, I would run it up like this. I'd say about 50% of the time, you can take a perfectly healthy bass, and just simply by moving it into another lake, it's not going to like it.
Yeah.
I can take that 4 pound great growing fish at Sugar Hill, move it to another pond, and watch it lose 1.5 pounds.
Yeah,
and
exactly. And then get
it
past
not
that
make
and buy
any
a different
sense.
fish.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
not make any sense. Yeah, like it has plenty of forage. It should be doing great, and it is not doing great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird how that works, but whatever allowed it to thrive in the other one, if it's missing or even slightly different from
Mhm.
the new pond you put it in, it's just not gonna perform the same. I actually saw a question on here that I think is a good one. Is stunting reversible? I feel like that's a good
Yeah, that is a good
topic to hit.
yeah, 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 we'll hit it. What do you think?
So, in a sense, yes, you can release pressure on an ecosystem by culling out fish and allowing your forage to rebound, and those fish will begin to grow again. But as soon as they slow down, they're never going to catch up to what they could be. So if they're growing like on a certain path and you knock them off that path, they're never going to grow to what they could be. Because in a, the scientific way to put it is that fish are indeterminate growers, so they'll literally grow until they die. So as soon as you slow that growth down, their age doesn't stop going up. So now that you've slowed the growth, their growth will never catch up to what that age could have been. That's kind of a fancy way of saying it. But essentially, yes, it's reversible. You just won't get what that fish could have been, basically. You'll get a 75% or 90%, depending on when you catch it and start that reversing process.
Right. Yeah, I agree. What I say to guys sometimes is like this. It's like, okay, so you let your bass population stun out. All right, that's cool. Everybody else did too. Now you want your bass population to grow again. All right. So none of the 12-inch, 14-inch bass that are swimming around in that lake right now are good for you. They're all old. They're all like 10 years old. It's like taking your grandpa down to the gym and telling him to bulk up. He's old. Just because he's small doesn't mean he's not old, right? So
Right.
you got to get all those old fish out. Now, the problem is, even if you could, I mean, if you can wave a magic wand and just take them all out, that's not the best thing for the pond. You got to get them out in stages. You can't just go yanking all the fish out at one time. Plus, it's usually physically not possible to do it anyway.
Yeah, no, you won't.
But
Even with an electrofishing boat, which we
no,
can touch on like myths associated with electrofishing in a second. But yeah,
oh,
so the stunning thing is that's why sometimes it gets recommended that you restart the pond over because the
mhm.
goals that people have, it might take you twice as long to get there by just harvesting fish out of your lake, trying to get the numbers back down. And a lot of times people don't like to hear that. They don't want to hear, oh, I got to kill all my fish and start over because they think, well, that means I won't have big bass for 5, 10 years. But that's usually the opposite case. Usually, if you don't kill the pond and you try to just recover the population, it's going to take you 5 years or longer, depending on how you do it, 3 to 5 years to even see changes in growth. Whereas, like in Sugar Hill, you just showed how fast they can grow from, 4 to 5 inches long when they have the appropriate environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean to further drag that, like look at the cost. You're going to spend $1,500, $2,000 on electrofishing surveys, right? I
Right.
spent $1,500 on all the fish in the pond.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's like you want to spend $1,500 to try to figure out what to stock when you can just flush it like a toilet and stock it properly.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
even worry about what's there now. Start it over. And I don't know why that makes dudes short circuit the way that it does.
No, it does.
Man, it makes nobody. I mean, I can count the number of people on one hand who have taken that advice, and I feel really lucky to have gotten in on Sugar Hill because around Georgia area, you're not building too many ponds anymore. The red tape and regulations, environmental whatever's, limnological reports, and wetland delineations, and whatever the hell else goes into getting a pond built anymore. Those days are all over with. So having a new pond just to show people, look, this is what happens if you drain it or you build it new, this is what happens when you stock it right, is invaluable, right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. When you're gonna pour a lot more than just 1,500 in to cull fish because depending on how fast you want it done, you're gonna be electrofishing a couple times a year or, you're gonna
Yeah.
spend a lot of time because 'cause you'll never fish out enough fish with a
You'll
rod and reel.
spend Over a
take you
10-year
way longer.
period, you'll spend 10 times the money for half the results.
Yeah.
And I know that because I've watched guys do it. I'm like, if he just would have drained that 5-acre pond initially and stocked it right, it would have been, whatever, say $5,000. And
Right.
in 10 years of stocking shad and shocking it twice a season and and blah, 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 blah. And his fishing was really not that much better than when we started the whole project. You do the best that you can do with what the hand that you're dealt in that situation. And then you look, like I said, you look at this situation and you're like, man, if you just would listen and do it that way, you'd have world-class fishing in your backyard. You would never go anywhere for the next 7 years to go fishing except right here.
Yeah,
It'd be,
exactly.
yeah. But you just, I don't know. I'm really glad that I'm able to have been able to record this whole process and show it to the people so they can have that, because that you literally have to show people. And then
Yeah.
every single time, once they see it, every single guy who's done it goes, man, I wish I'd have done this a long time ago.
Right, because it makes sense when you can see the results, but if people can't see the results,
Yep.
they don't wanna believe you, which I mean, that's fair enough, I guess. Seeing is usually believing, but yeah, no, it's crazy. Now, the smaller your pond is, the easier it is to reverse that stunning process because you can, your biomass is smaller. You can correct those population structures easier. But that being said, it's also fairly cheap to drain it and start over, so it's
Well, it's a slippery slope in both directions. It's easier to fix it and it's easier to mess it up.
right, exactly.
So can you get it? Can you get your stunted population going better again? Sure. Can you over harvest it and and take it in the other direction where you're adding fish in the other direction? Absolutely. And then that brings up a point too. Like when you get the competing species and you got a bunch of different fish species in there instead of like the recommended ones, you end up doing that in pond management a lot. It's kind of like pushing a ball uphill. In one year you're going uphill this way, the next year you're doing something completely opposite, going in the other direction, trying to compensate for whatever. And again, drain it, start it from scratch, start it right, do it right, and reap the benefits like nothing you've ever seen before.
Yeah, it'll be a way faster process. Because yeah, like you said, getting everything back into balance is a lot easier said than done. you know, when you're not out there monitoring it like once a month, you have no idea what's happening. So it's just,
Well,
yeah,
here's
it's a
here's
lot
some,
easier to pull the plug.
again, a perfect example of where I like to be online. And here's Drew coming in with, he's got 5 acres of water. He moved 150 bass a year, and it took 5 years. Some actual real data, right?
Yeah, and
That's
that's
actual functional walking around the world data that people need. If anybody with a 5-acre pond can look at that and now go, okay, well, that guy did that and he got results. Right. Well, in 5 years on a 5-acre pond, do you know how big the bass would be if you started it over?
yeah. In
You
in in 5 years, yeah.
in tens that you'll be catching so many 8 to 10 pound fish. I don't even know how many good videos that you could make on YouTube. That's where it's really going to start. I think you'll really start seeing these guys drain the ponds. I'm starting to see the high subscriber YouTube guys are starting to build ponds and they're starting to do their own pond. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
You're
I've
starting
seen
to see some
that. We
pond
have a
content?
guy
Yeah,
he wants to stock his new lake this year, and
yeah,
yeah, he keeps referencing Bama Bass and all these other guys. I'm okay.
yeah,
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 we can do stuff like that, but slow down a little bit on the YouTuber
yeah,
information.
yeah,
Be
yeah,
careful what you do and don't listen to.
yeah, 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 yeah. I hear you on that. But the funny thing is that now I got guys following me who are going out into the world looking at everybody else and coming back to me and they're like DMing me and they're going, "Hey man, did you see where such and such did such and such?" Yes, I did. Well, what do you think about that? I was like, well, I don't know. You've watched me long enough. What do you think I think about that? And then they're like, well, I think it's going to happen this way. And I was like, I think you're right. So we're able to communicate like colleagues, like you and I would communicate, because they
Exactly.
have a deeper understanding of what's going on. And that's how you learn, and we can make our own mistakes and learn from them, but we can also watch other people and learn from theirs.
Well, that and communication is what's so important in the field that we're in, because there's been no new research on like stocking lakes or anything since the 30s, like late 1930s,
Probably.
with
I don't know.
Homer Swingle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a
So
little, but not much.
yeah, but there's no big corporations funding any research in that because
Mm-mm.
they don't care. There's no money to be made. Aquaculture is one thing, you can make money in that, but in our industry, it's just us telling each other stuff.
Yeah.
So, and learning by trial and error. So there's not a very good way for people to educate themselves on the stuff that we know, because there's no research out there that's high quality to read. It's just what people say.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know who knows what they're talking about when you're just reading stuff online, because anyone can make anything sound good. I could write an article that's completely untrue and probably convince 75% of the people that read it that I was right.
Mm-hmm. I think that's where most of our problems lie. It's not nobody sat out into the world twisting their mustache and going, you know what, I'm going to ruin all the bass fisheries in small water in North America. Nobody sat down and did that. But leaving these things out, not fully understanding harvesting, not being able to sit down and talk about it the way we just talked about it, and going, hey, look, everything is different.
Right.
Not everything is the same.
Well, and seeing something once in your pond doesn't mean it's going to work somewhere else. I mean, it's just, that's not how it works at all. And that's where having like the college background and understanding, the different components is so important. Like if you can understand all the components, then you can put together why things happen. And that's how you problem solve and apply things to different, ponds and lakes. But for people that don't have any background, they hear one thing and they assume that that's how it applies everywhere. And it's like, just like this example, it took them 5 years to get bass growing again by pulling out 150 bass a year. Okay, well, someone else with a 5-acre pond might have to pull out 300 bass a year, depending on how long they've been in there. So, I mean, it's a good
Exactly
example. It's
right.
a good starting point, but you might
Yep.
do it and go, well, why didn't that work for me? It's because there's more
Right.
to it than just that.
One of the dudes that follows the page, his name's Preston, but he goes by Hokey Fish Biologist on Instagram. I know everybody by like weird code names and stuff. I don't know anybody's real name.
Right.
So Hokey Fish Biologist is doing that. He's a co-host now on that fisheries podcast. Have you seen that one?
Which
There's one called
fisheries?
it's called the Fisheries Podcast.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I've seen them mostly on like Facebook advertisements. I see them over there mostly, but I've listened to them a few times. It's pretty good, fish guys talking about fish stuff, but the last one, they were introducing Preston as one of the co-hosts now for them and talking about what he studied, and to get his master's, he literally did a fish harvest study. And yeah, I mean, like you said, how many of those have you seen?
Yeah, there's not. Well,
there's not many, not new ones, old ones, plenty, but not new ones. And well, the one thing I wanted to touch on before I even go down Preston's project is there's a disconnect between what these guys think. Like they hear it online or they hear what we're talking about here. That's two completely different things, because what we're talking about here, like you said, it's been measured for 100 years now, almost.
Right.
It's a measured, proven science. They don't need to do any more research projects on it. I've been working in the field 30 years. I haven't disproven anything they've said from that school. You know what I mean? I don't know what you need to research. It's pretty much nailed. The only thing I've changed is stocking a few more bass per acre because people don't keep them anymore. Or stocking a few fewer bass per acre.
Right.
But other than that, as far as the books go, they're pretty rock solid on the information. It's on there.
Right. And if it didn't work, you'd know about it because way more people listen to state recommendations and follow those recommendations than
absolutely
communicate with us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, those recommendations have been used forever by a lot of different people, myself included. And like I said, I couldn't disprove any of the information that I learned. And again, this stuff isn't just from the University of Georgia, because a lot of these projects were done at Auburn, were done at Texas A&M, were done at Clemson, were done at different places, and then all piled together. So we've all read the research from most of the universities that study fisheries. There's a big difference in talking about that and what you observed at your 5-acre pond, like this one. Exactly. That's a great correlation, but what Preston found out on his project is what I've seen in the field many times too. He had a 20-acre system that was crowded with bass, and he had a 40-acre system that was crowded with bass. He said that the 40 was not as crowded. The relative rates were not as bad. They had some diversity of size, but they definitely had a slot of fish that were, crowded. And we probably both know they're 12 to 14 inch range. It's probably right there.
Exactly.
The other ponds, same way, except the crowding was worse. Like, there wasn't that upper end diversity of size, but it was a smaller impoundment. The smaller impoundment was crowded a little bit worse. So for several seasons, they went in, they go get the electrofishing boat out and get all the fish out they want to harvest out. And it was funny the way I heard him talk about it, because I've witnessed it a bunch of times. The 40-acre lake swung around faster. It wasn't as stunted. Therefore, it came back into a balanced situation better, quicker. And they started seeing results much quicker. They pulled the same amount out of the 20-acre lake, and the next season go back and do all their calculations. The bass actually got smaller.
Yeah, it wasn't enough
after the harvest. Yeah, it just didn't. It completely didn't do what you thought it was going to do. And that doesn't mean the science doesn't work. See, that's where the disconnect is with the general public and science. Well, you told me to go take 150 bass and it didn't work. Yeah, because yours is not in the same situation as the other one.
Right. Exactly. We've seen the worst one I've seen so far. We shocked over 80 bass out of a 4-acre lake in like a 2-hour survey, and 12 bluegill. So, how many bass are you gonna have to take out of that to, by comparison to another 4-acre lake that might have, we might have only pulled 50 bass out, or whatever. That's one of the worst situations I've ever seen. Yeah. Just by that ratio of 80 to 12, and you can guess every bluegill was bigger than your hand.
Plates. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, what you would tell him to do is going to be completely different from someone else with a 4-acre pond that may also have stunted bass, but has a way better forage population because it's only been stunted for 3 years versus 15, or whatever. It's hard to give people advice and solve their problems online, because there's no just cookie cutter way to do it. That's why electrofishing is so beneficial. And a lot of people I don't know. I hear people say that electrofishing isn't worth the cost. You can just fish and find out your information. But I've seen data with over 270 data points of angler catch records. And based on those angler catch records, it looked like your bass crowding was in the 16 to 18 inch range. But then when we electrofished that same lake, we found out that it was actually crowded in the 12 to 14 inch range. There was a pretty high abundance of the 16 to 18 inch fish. But because when you fish for bass, you don't fish to catch little fish, you fish to catch big fish. So you're automatically selecting and creating biased data.
Sure.
So, your prescription to manage that lake without the electrofishing boat would have been a lot different, and you would have made the problem way worse. So it's like,
I think the electrofishing boat is important for that reason right there. When you are into really growing fish for guys, and like you said, the guy, he calls you up and he says, it's your job, take care of it. Here's the check.
Those are the fun ones.
Yeah, those are the best ones. There's not many of them, but
No,
there's
but when you
there's a
find
few.
them, you better hold
Yeah,
on to them.
there's a few. Most of the time, for anybody listening, most of the time what happens is the guy calls you up, hems and haws, listens to about half of what you say, goes on the internet, for some reason takes some other dude's advice, and then goes spends his money in a way he never should have spent it. That's how it
Right.
happens most of the time. But no, that's those are the best ones by far. And well, I'm getting a bunch. Let me catch up on my questions here.
Yeah, I've been kind of watching them, but I haven't.
I know they'll pile up on you, and then you got a mess. Oh, it's Josh. Yeah, no, well, see, like Josh is talking about, old research, and so what did they do? Old research. How did they do that? Well, they took a pond and they filled it up and they put some fish in it and they let it go for a year or two and they drained the pond and they measured the health of those fish. And they did that again and again and again, hundreds, if not thousands of times with different combinations of fish populations, right? So that's the part these guys don't understand. When we go to them and we say, okay, this is what we recommend, but they're coming back from what they heard on the internet. And it's like, no. You don't have the setup for any of that. Like you've heard all these, I want tilapia and I want, whatever. I don't care what fish species you're talking about. Every single place is different.
Right.
You can't just put tilapia. Like in Georgia, you can't just stock tilapia because you want to. It's illegal.
Texas you can, but
yeah,
Louisiana you can't, and we do both, and it's like
right. And I just try to put it into people's head that, look, man, let's look at Sugar Hill Outdoors. Let's take a real world example. What did I do? I took a simple bluegill, put it in that little 2-acre pond of water, fed it every day, gave it the right numbers of bass. The bass grow great. There's nothing else magical to it other than understanding the balance of the fishery. I don't care if there was bluegill, threadfin shad, golden shiner, and every other magic tilapia, every other thing that you want to put in that pond, those bass would not be growing at very much different rates.
Right.
Because I stocked them at 40 per acre.
Right.
They're growing at the 40 per acre rate. You know what I'm saying? Like
exactly.
I've stocked so many ponds with a multitude of different forage, and they still don't grow any faster than these fish are growing on bluegill.
Exactly. Well, and there's another thing I think people don't realize is that your pond can only hold so many pounds of fish. So it doesn't matter if you can only hold 100 pounds of forage fish per acre. It doesn't matter if you have 10 different species of forage fish. You're only going to have 100 pounds of forage fish per acre anyway. So
Right.
They can only grow so fast.
Right.
And to answer this question you just clicked on, they've done studies on a lot of different species of forage fish. I don't remember all of them, but I know it was golden shiners, goldfish, and a couple other ones, which people don't really use goldfish as forage fish, but they used it in the study. And they stocked only those fish with bass, and they let it go for like a year or 2 years, however long it was. And the only one that wasn't completely decimated at the end of that study was bluegill. Those were the only ones that had. Now their populations were low, right, because they weren't harvesting any bass.
Right.
But the only one that was still present in any number, that would it be able to grow a fish or feed fish was bluegill. Most of the others, golden shiners, goldfish, they were gone, decimated.
Yeah.
And that's why bluegill is your best choice. Yeah. Now you can pair bluegill with other fish. Like I like red ear. I think they have a good role in the ecosystem, and they're not really competing with your bluegill. But at the end of the day, if you only do red ear, by the end of the year, you're not gonna have any fish left. So you have to have bluegill in there. No matter what forage combination you want, if bluegill aren't involved, you're done. It's over.
That's exactly right. And I'll add to that the term, Christine, that we're talking about is called recruitment. So what does that mean? Like I went to the University of Georgia. Garrett went to Texas A&M. Both those college football programs recruit strong. We get good football players every single season. Only
one of them wins national championships, but
it
is true. What it is.
There's always good football players at A&M. There's always good football players at the University of Georgia. That's just how that works. Okay, that's good recruitment. So bluegill work the exact same way. They have so many babies and they spawn so often that recruitment, that the new kids coming into the population are coming at a rate at which the bass can't over consume. And that's what we've been discussing this whole time. Stunted bass populations are bass populations with just a few too many bass in them. So they're over consuming the forage that's there, and that stops their growth. So how do we correct that? We harvest some bass out, reduce some of the hunting pressure on the forage base, and that'll bring more forage into the population and leave more food for the bass that are there. It's a weird way to think about it. I know it almost seems illogical. But once you understand how fisheries dynamics works, it's very logical. It's easy. It's just kind of weird at first. It's almost like when you learn how you put like X in algebra. Like, how does an X become a number? Well, that doesn't make any sense at first. Fisheries is the same way, but maybe a pie is the best way to think about it. You want 3/4 of the pie to be forage. You want 1/4 of the pie to be predators. If the predator part of the forage of your pie gets bigger, the forage part of your pie gets smaller. It has to. It's an inverse relationship.
Right. Well, and it actually applies to all animals. I mean, animal ecology, you'll learn, predator prey dynamics, and the way it works in the natural system is predators go up, prey goes down, predator population crashes, then prey population goes up. And basically what you're doing in a pond is you're manipulating that and preventing those crashes up and down.
Yeah.
And because ponds aren't natural systems, you have to, otherwise your predators get on top and they stay on top because there's nothing to check them, basically.
Right. I guess I run into that a lot online. Well, you just need to leave it natural. It's like, oh, you mean this man-made impoundment, the one you're calling natural?
If we were going to leave it natural, we should have left it the field that it was before.
Yeah,
we
better knock the dam
there.
down. Yeah, and return it to the stream that it used to be. Which brings up another point you mentioned earlier that we can touch on when discussing electrofishing surveys, is the amount of misinformation around what you're going to find there. I found so many people think, oh, I'm going to see the biggest bass in my pond because y'all are coming to electrofish it. And it's like, man, no, that's not how that works. You're lucky to see 1% of the fish population in a small pond from an electrofishing survey. Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest ones is people, when you go out there and you do the survey, they're like, this is all the fish that are in my pond? I'm like, no, this is just a sample of it. And then when you explain that to people online, then they're like, oh, well, then it's not worth the money. It's like, okay, but you want to fix the population. Electrofishing is the only way to see all of the fish of different species at the same time.
Right.
You can do it. If you're going to do it with a rod and reel, you're going to have biased data. We kind of already hinted on that.
Yep.
You can try to avoid that data bias by fishing a little bit more scientifically, but it's going to take you way longer to get the same amount of data. So you don't know if that data still correlates together. Then you have good days of fishing, bad days of fishing. You can't really apply that all together. You can take a guess and you might be right 1 out of 100 times, but with a shock boat, when you go in there, you're surveying, you get everything at once, all the fish that you're going to shock. You're not getting every fish in the pond, but you get a glimpse of what the population structure looks like all at one time. You're not, fishing for bluegill today and then bass tomorrow and then smaller bluegill the next day. You know what I mean? You get to look at it all at once, and you can come up with a plan to change that or manipulate that population however you want to. Rod and reel, you're not going to get that. You'll get the most aggressive bass, the most aggressive bluegill, and then usually bigger fish of any species that you fish for. So with that data, you don't really get anything.
Yeah, it's definitely harder to do. Now, and I've helped plenty of guys online. My whole idea on my page is to help the guys who can't afford an electrofishing survey, because in my experience over the years of speaking to people, there is a heck of a lot of them. You know what I mean? There
Right.
are way more people who can't afford an electrofishing survey than can.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's what this page is for. You know, if you guys want a shock survey, call Garrett. He'll come right out there to you. You just do that up, and that's part of my thing too. I am not getting back on that boat. That is, I'm done. I'm on strike. You're not getting me on this shock boat anymore. The shine wore off that chrome for me a long time ago. Like you said, I've still got the 3 or form letters that I could hand you or what we're going to find after we get off of it anyway. I know what's going to
Right.
happen. I don't even have to like look. It's just work. It's just a job for me at this point. And I don't want any part of it, but I'm certainly glad to have you come and look. I'm looking, the biggest part I'm looking forward to is looking at the reproduction and the
Right.
relative weights of the reproduction. I know what's going to happen with the Floridas already. I know what's going to happen with the Northerns already. I've done this enough times with either one of those. And I know what's going to happen with the F1s. I could get F1s considerably bigger than both species of this fish at this stocking rate in ponds in the area, you know, similar bodies of water that this 20 years ago, some of them, but still I've gotten better growth rates on F1s than on either of these two. I guess they're species now. Are they Florida species and northern species are considered 2 different species now?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. I know they kind of go back and forth. I don't know if they've ever actually
I
defined
think
one over
they
the
just
other.
changed it a little while ago. I heard somebody else talking about it, and I think Florida species is now Mycopterus salmoides, and northern has a different, and they're actually literally considering them 2 different species of
Hmm.
bass now. I
Okay.
think that's what I heard. Um, Irrelevant. You can't tell them apart, you know,
No.
but
People claim they can, but yeah, you can't. Not without DNA analysis.
exactly. And then so these guys, that's the funny part today. Oh, these are Florida bass. Oh yeah, where'd you genetically test them at? Well, they
Yeah.
just are. What? Well, the guy who sold them to you told him you know,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, but he's going to tell you whatever you want to hear to buy those fish, dude. You ever think about that? And that's just like, you know, so it's like you
Yeah.
don't even know. I'm so convinced that the Florida bass don't grow well in North Georgia that when somebody tells me I got Florida bass in my pond that grew faster than your Florida bass, I'll be like, are you sure they're Floridas?
Yeah. Find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Run the genetics on that, bro, because every single time, and I haven't had too many times in my career where we did just stock pure Floridas. I have a few, but not that many. And every single time, I got really bad catch per unit effort and really bad growth rates on pure Floridas.
Right.
Didn't see anything like what you hear the talk online about,
Right.
right?
Well, and it's not to say that those fish they stock don't have some Florida influence. They
Right.
just might not be 100% Floridas. It's hard now to find a pure strain any direction you go because there's been so much crossbreeding between the two and you can't externally tell them apart. So it's just like
Mhm.
we know these are majority Floridas. Here you go, or
Right.
one way or the other.
Right. I agree. And I think too that with some of the genetic stuff that I've seen, it's like, how could you not, you want to test your rivers to see if you have Florida genetics there. I guarantee you have Florida genetics there. They've been stocking F1s. I don't even know how long, 40 years.
Florida's
F1's
too.
been,
They've
yeah, they've
they've
been
been
coming
stocking
out of
them
fish
forever.
hatcheries. Any of those fish that got out around an emergency spillway out of a pond and down the stream is spreading Florida genetics around your rivers. You know, I mean, that should be common sense. You don't need to do a whole survey to do to know that.
Yeah, well, and most state agencies have been putting them places for since the mid 1900s. So I
Forever.
mean,
Yeah.
they're everywhere.
That's the point that I try to make to dudes is like, if you come to me and the first thing that you want to talk about is the genetics of the bass that you're about to stock,
You're focusing
I
on the
already know
wrong
you
thing.
ain't on my level. You're way behind me and you. You know what I mean? Like you're worrying about something that's irrelevant. I'll take bass out of a ditch and put them into a new pond that I've been feeding for a year with bluegill and maybe a few thread fins and crush the growth off of any fish you want to go and get.
Right.
I don't care about the genetics until the balance is there first.
Yeah, it
So if
doesn't
you're not,
matter if you put a $50 largemouth, if it's in an environment that it
mm-hmm,
can't grow in, it doesn't matter what its genetics look like. It's not gonna grow.
exactly. So it's like and I'm glad I've got so many guys on here watch. Shout out to 11 dudes still here, man. I appreciate you guys. Yeah, I'm glad we got guys out of the world who are like listening to these conversations, you know, I, because we need the conversation to advance.
Right.
I'm listening to the same stuff I've been listening to since the 80s.
Well, and a lot of people will talk about genetics. That makes people excited. They wanna know
Oh yeah.
what genetics are the best, and then so for all the people that watch this, they now have a way to explain, "Well, hold up a little bit. Before we get into genetics, what are you gonna do to prep those fish?" You know?
Hmm.
It's like if you took the best racehorse there was, and you never fed it or gave it any water and then put it in a race, is it gonna win? No, it's not. So, you can't do that with fish either.
Exactly. That's a good comparison. They have to have the right environment. Even the best genetics in the world. Go get me a 40-pound bass and a 30-pound bass that you bred together, and you've got the best genetics of a bass population in the world. Stock them at 100 fish per acre. Don't care. They're not growing past 12
Yeah.
inches.
Or
you
or
know,
stock them with your forage at the same time, like a
or
lot of
yeah,
people do,
or mess it
and
up in one way or another. But yeah, they're
yeah,
not doing it. They're not doing it.
or
And
yeah.
showing it, that's where you got to do it. And that's where it goes back to where we kind of started the conversation. When you get to work, you've got your workflow, right? You've got everything that you do to get your job done that day, from pulling up, not sinking the boat, not wrecking the boat, not getting the boat stuck because you never use a boat ramp. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, there's a multitude of stuff that you've got to do in our profession just to get in and out of there that most people don't have to deal with, and then people never even consider. But on top of all of that, now you have to become a cameraman,
Yeah.
and you have to become an editor, and then you have to dedicate that amount of time to coming on and doing stuff like this a couple times a week. All that stuff piles up, and it's hard. It's super hard to
Yeah.
film all
It's
this stuff.
fun to do, but yeah, no, remembering to film stuff or just catching things like you can film something, and then as soon as you put away the camera, that's when something cool happens. And you're like, seriously, all the stuff that I was doing, if I would have just videoed the last 5 minutes of what I was doing, I would have caught something way cooler. Because when you're out there, you never know what's going to happen, what you're going to see. That's what
I
makes
know.
the job fun. Everywhere you show up to, from like you said, not getting the boat stuck. We've had multiple times launching, and then we're looking, we're like, yep, all right, pull the boat out. We're going somewhere else. That ain't going to
No,
work.
you're not.
Sunk to the axle in mud. And it's like, especially in the drought, man, it
Oh
was rough
man.
this summer. It was like, God, how do we even get into this pond? We got a 4-foot shelf that we got to try to put the shock boat down.
Oh,
Like,
you
hopefully we
guys
can get
have
it
so
out.
many kayak things you can get now. You have so many choices in equipment now that we didn't have back in the day. What you need is a 14-foot John boat. Just drag it in there.
Oh yeah,
Just,
that's we've done that too. It's not fun, but we've done it.
yeah, I know, man. I know. It's
But
crazy. So what are your plans? Like you got anything significantly planned for the shocking job coming Georgia way? You have any
no,
other?
now it's well, we have Sugar Hill Outdoors. Clint told me he knows someone else in that
Okay.
area. I think it might be the same person you know. It's like a 100-acre lake or something. It's pretty
Yeah,
big.
yeah, the one up the street. That's a cool place and will be great content. I caught a nice fish out there. It was 26 and a half inch fish,
That's
but it
pretty
didn't
good.
even yeah, it didn't even go over 9. Pretty low relative weight rise. And if we get it done in the springtime, hopefully we'll get some people who catch traction. I'm going to make some more posts, and we'll talk about this a lot more going forward before you come out, and hopefully we can pick up some work for you along the way there. But that being said, I would really like to see the bigger lake. I think personally what we'll see is we just need to do it, and do it in the spring will be good too, because we need to hit the crappie over the head out there. I think they've
Yeah.
got a heavy crappie issue in there that's probably holding their bass back.
Well, that's another thing I think that you can talk about is, there's a lot of state recommendations, and it varies from 10 to 30 to 50 acres on when crappie can go in. But I think people focus on that and assume that just because your lake is bigger than whatever those thresholds are, that you don't need to harvest crappie as heavily.
Oof.
But I can tell you right now, we're dealing with a multi-thousand acre lake that is stunted to the gills with crappie. So it doesn't
Mm.
matter how big it is, if you don't
Mhm.
stay on top of them,
Oh yeah,
it'll happen.
it will.
So
And crappie are the worst too. Like I've got one. I'll be doing a little long. I've done a few videos on YouTube on the Wilson's farm ponds up there in Thomasville, Georgia. He's a perfect example. 2.4 acre pond, and goes in and just hammers them. I mean, hundreds of pounds of hand size thin crappie, just 35-pound, 5-gallon buckets, one after the next, just wore the fish out of there. You know what I mean? He's
right.
got another 9-acre pond down the road, same situation, exact same thing we just described. The little 2.5-acre pond swung back around. There's decent bluegill fishing. There's decent bass fishing. Catch 6 to 8 pound bass. The crappie are looking better. You're seeing some bass reproduction come back. The other pond completely opposite. Bass fish all you want. You don't get a bite. You can still go catch all the crappie you want, all hand size, all under relative weight. It's just like you go remove, and it was over 3,000 pounds of crappie from those two systems in 2-year period, and get nowhere on one of
Yeah.
them. You know, um,
When a single fish can put over 100,000 offspring back into the water in a
yeah,
year, how do you
yeah,
how do you stop that?
you can't,
Yeah. I mean,
and
yeah, it's a nightmare. It
you
is.
can't. It just doesn't work, and that's one thing I notice in being a consultant. It's like you need to drain this pond and get the crappie. I'll fix it. These guys, they're the ones who are going to change science.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Oh, I'll do it. No, you can't change science, man. Like there's a multitude of reasons why this isn't going to work out good for you and why you're wasting your money. And getting them to listen, man.
Yeah. Well, and
Drew
the
comes
sun
in
is
with a question: quickly identify a male or female largemouth. You get any tips for that question?
well, in the spawning season, you can do that, but outside of the spawn, you're not really gonna be able to tell them apart. There's no
I can
external.
think of one way.
What way? Well, size. I
If it
mean, size is
size,
one way, but
size, yeah. If
but
it's
if
over 5, it's a female, probably.
yeah, if you're in
Yeah.
a stunted lake, though, good luck. I
Oh
mean, they all
no.
look the same. But yeah, pre-spawn, you can kind of like hand strip some eggs out, or if you have really fat fish in a stunted lake, those are obviously your females. Males, you can kind of strip milt out of their body cavity. But outside of that, I mean, other than size, you can't really tell them apart. Um, so
I'd
you
agree. I'd
just
agree. Yep, catch them in the spring, and you can tell that way. And otherwise, and everything over 5 pounds is your females, and that's it. Those are or cut them open. If you don't
yeah,
mind,
yeah. I mean, but
cut
if
them
you want
open.
them to be
Look.
alive, if you want them to be alive, good luck, huh?
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Uh-huh.
I mean, I guess
Yeah,
you could like draw blood from them and then have that analyzed and determine it that way, but that's a lot more complicated. I mean, it's just, how
exactly.
bad do you want to know, I guess is the real question.
Yeah, and for what reason? What does it even matter? When they're stunted, just throw them in the emulsion, throw them in the fryer, throw them someplace else. Don't throw them back in the daggum ponds, boys.
Yeah, you're not doing them any favors. Starving to death versus a quick death is probably, I think a quick
Yeah,
death is a lot more merciful.
that's the point too. That we've reached a point in a lot of these ponds where the bass literally are starving. It's not even like, oh, it's a little stunted. These fish are just in emaciated
Yeah.
states. It's bad.
I've seen some pretty bad ones where it's like you don't even know how it swims or is even alive anymore.
I know,
But
man. Those 60% relative weighters and stuff like that.
man,
How about
we've got some 45
ooh?
around 40 is about the lowest I've ever seen. But I mean, the fish
Ah,
was basically dead.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
just like I don't even know how it's alive at
Yeah.
that
It
low.
just looked like bones with
Yeah.
scales on it.
Sad, man. I hate seeing fish like that. Drew's writing in. He's looking for an all-female population. Have you ever any experience with managing one of those yet?
No, not yet. But I
Yeah.
know you're never going to be able to get that if you already have bass, if you have both sexes already in the lake. The only way
Right.
to do that would be to start over. You're not going to just be able to weed out all the males because it goes back to you'll never catch all the fish with a shock boat, with a rod and reel. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you'll never catch them all.
Right.
So
Yeah, the drain and
going all
restock would
female,
be
yeah,
absolutely essential if you're going for the standard all-female population. And the idea there is you don't have any reproduction. All the bass can be trophies because they're all females. They can all get over 10 pounds. And you don't have any worries about, having reproduction come in and crowd the fish population out. But just like Garrett said, the problem you're going to have is keeping males out, especially most ponds have streams. They're usually for erosion control. It's how they were built originally. So you'll really it's going to be really rare place to keep an all female bass population. But what really jumps out for me at that is I don't even care that if I can't keep the males out. If I stocked a new pond and it had a stream and I knew I was going to get male bass in anyway, I'd like the idea of all females that first stocking because it doubles my chances of trophies in
right.
5 years. And that's the only reason I would love to use them just for that. Let them spawn. I don't care.
Yeah, and
I'll
you're
take
calling
that.
the small fish anyway. So at that point, you're taking out mostly males.
Yeah, just let them go, let them grow, put them in there at that low rate, 35, 42, whatever, somewhere down in there, depending on the pond, and let them chew and see how big they'll get.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah, if you wanted to keep it female only, you have to make sure that there's nothing in your watershed that can drain into your pond.
I've seen a few ponds like that, but they're rare.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
usually if you're building a pond and it's catching water from runoff, it's
It's
coming
usually
from somewhere.
mhm. It's usually not all groundwater is what we're getting at. Like there's two different ways. Groundwater flow, for anybody who doesn't understand, is like people don't think about groundwater flow, but rain hits the ground, soaks in. If it's not used by a plant, it moves down through the ground and into a stream or into a lake, wherever that's called hydrology. And it's a completely different form of science that we have to kind of partially understand doing what we do. And that groundwater flow has to do with everything uphill of your pond, which is called your watershed. So however much rain hits your watershed is however much water will eventually end up into your pond, and you'll need an engineer. I see a lot of guys making mistakes building their own ponds, not getting the engineering done right.
Right. If you're
Uh,
gonna put a pond in a place where it doesn't have a watershed, you better have a well to fill it up, and a
yeah.
big one.
And that even brings in some different ideas and different management challenges. Cause when you did a great post on Facebook about using well water, to fill a pond,
Right.
that changes the water chemistry a lot. Have you had some experience with that and doing treatments in those situations?
Yeah, so our most recent one, we had a guy. Now he has a watershed, but he just wanted the pond to be full now, so he filled it up with a well, and he had an alkalinity of 0 and a hardness of 12 in his
Yeah.
well water. So water quality is not great. He put lime in the basin, but not enough. He did about 1 ton per acre.
Yeah.
So we're still too low on our alkalinity and our hardness. But I've also seen it the opposite way, where the alkalinity coming out of the well water is above 200, but your
Yep.
hardness is like 15. So
Yep.
that skews water quality wrong in the opposite direction. And
Yep.
now they're dealing with a high pH. So yeah, well water, a lot of people think, oh, I drink my well water, it's clear, it's good for fish. But what fish need and what people need from their water is not the same. So you better, if you're going to fill your lake with well water, you better test it before you do it, because a lot of times it's not conducive to good fish growth.
You got that right. And one of the things that I noticed over the year, it took many years to get there because I first started my business just working for myself. And then you do something for a while, 10 years or so or whatever, and people get to know you, and you get, like you say, some lake companies you establish a working relationship with, and some you don't.
Right.
And that happened to me, and I subcontracted and did electrofishing surveys for a lot of different folks all over the country, all over the South or Eastern United States there for a while. And that's when I started going up into North Carolina, going to Virginia, going around. I've even been as far north as Chicago, just looking at taking on different work in different areas of the country. And then that's when you start to realize that, oh, wait a minute, the treatment that I used in Georgia on algae doesn't work in Charlotte on algae.
Right.
Doesn't work in, not at all the same thing as in Chicago, and the differences in water quality are drastic in different regions of the country,
Right.
They're completely different. And then that changes like what you thought you knew. And the funny part about that was then, and it was kind of the last hurrah for me. Like I said, I sold the business out, and I had to work for the dude that bought it for a while. That's part of the deal, and then, so it was weird because I've never had a boss or anything, kind of laugh at that whole situation. It's like, whatever. And the guy not the guy that bought my company owned it, but he had like a office manager,
Mm-hmm.
and anytime you put MGR behind somebody's name, they get an ego, I think. So this guy was my new boss, right?
Okay.
And I don't know, I don't know the right word. What's the right word? He accused me of it once. When you don't listen to the boss on purpose, what's that word?
Pride, maybe.
No, it's just I can't think. I'm so old anymore. They fire you for it, if you ignore your boss. That term. I can't think of it. I'll remember it tomorrow. Anyway, the guy got pissed at me because I didn't take him very seriously. So he wrote out the insubordination. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. Yes, that's the one. Insubordination. He called me insubordinate because I didn't do exactly what he told me to do. It sounds like this is in a meeting. So I said, all right, so exactly how was I insubordinate? Well, he gets out his piece of paper, I told you to go to that pond in Georgia now, the one that I've managed for 15 years, and apply some ungodly amount of copper, 2.5 gallons or something, 3 gallons of copper per acre.
Max labeled rate, probably.
Max label rate, yeah, whatever it was, like Q-Trine Plus or whatever I was using, But yeah, it was absolutely dosing the label rate just on steroids. Like, how much can we put in there? Put that in there, the absolute most. Now, what you don't have to understand is the lake, the pond that I was going to, the water hardness is 12.
Eesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're walking a thin line there.
No, bro, no. So what we're getting at, guys, is copper is extremely toxic to fish. The lower the limestone, the lower the hardness and alkalinity content, the higher the toxicity becomes because there's no binding of that chemical out by the water. So if you go into Georgia at dose rates of copper, you're killing fish. You're just lighting them up.
Especially if you're using copper sulfate, especially Q-Trine, a little bit safer, but copper sulfate, man, I don't even mess with that stuff.
I don't either. I don't mess with copper sulfate. Never did. Just it's too hot. It's too much, and
it's not as effective.
It's not long-term effect. It's really not. It's really way more copper than you need. That you're just putting copper into the environment that you really don't need.
And its duration of activity in the water is lower, so it's way more or less. It's not worth it.
Yeah. So anybody using
cheap,
copper sulfate,
a lot of people
it is cheap. That's the problem. It's cheap, but you don't really. There's much smarter ways that you can go about doing it. But anyway, the back of the story, the guy's telling me I'm insubordinate because I didn't put the 3 gallons or whatever it was when I literally needed like 3 quarts to do the treatment. Like in Georgia, in our soft ass water, dude, like you don't need, just
Much.
show it the jug. You know what I mean? Just kind of open the lid and waft the lid at it. You know, we don't have to use it like you guys have to use it up there, you know? So that was his whole big thing. He was up in arms and insubordinate. I was insubordinate because I didn't listen. So I told him that story. I said, I'm not in the business of killing fish.
Yeah.
And what is the average hardness for the ponds that you guys treat up there anyway? And this is a question I directed to him, you know, and I can see, look at your mind. You're racking through your mind right now going, okay, what would my average hardness
Yeah,
be?
it goes by region. There is no average.
Dude was
Central
drawing
Texas,
a complete blank.
yeah.
He had no idea like what water chemistry was in any of the places he was sending, in any of the 20 guys that he had working under him. He had no idea.
Yeah,
You know?
that's a big problem when it comes to spraying. Is a lot of times, and it's not every company, but a lot of companies have like technician spraying, and it's not their fault. They don't know any
No,
better. They don't know what to look for.
right.
So you do run into a lot of problems if you don't know your water chemistry, you know, whether it's effectiveness, chances of fish kills, you know, what they use the water for even.
Hey,
So
I
yeah,
would have done it if I didn't have 20 something years experience at the time and know that's not how this works.
yeah,
You know, like this is like it's real in the field. It's you know, it
yeah.
ain't gonna lie to you out there.
Well, that's
And
why the label has 0.6 gallons per acre foot to 3.3. There's
yep,
depending on what you're dealing with is what you need to, but a lot of people don't even read the label. So that, you know, that's a whole different
yeah,
topic
read the
that's
label,
scary on its own.
boys. I know, and that's another big reason why I do what I do is like so people can get a little bit of just, hey, let me talk to somebody who's done this before,
Right.
you know, and usually that's all you got to do.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, just do
It's
it like that, you're good, you know?
yeah. Well, and spraying is not as easy as just mixing a chemical and then putting it out in the water.
Oh,
It's not
no.
that simple.
Mm-mm.
Doesn't matter
No,
what you're treating, it's never that simple. But
no, it's complex. It's highly complex.
that's why we don't tell people what, you know, you can, if you want to spray your own stuff, go for it. But I'm not going to tell you what to use, how much to use, because I'm not going to be liable for anything that you mess up.
Oh,
That's
no, exactly, and I don't understand the whole concept of like, when I was in business doing those treatments, I had the licensing, I had the insurance I had to carry for that,
yeah,
I had EPA, EPD checks every year. Those guys came in, they were in your paperwork and making sure you're not doing anything wrong, and I'm like, I'm good with all that, okay? Let's just say I'll just put that out there. I think that's exactly how this should be,
yeah, I
except
agree.
except Joe Schmo can go right down the road to the farm supply store, buy all these chemicals, keep them at his house, put them on his pond that he does not have a college degree in treating, that he doesn't know what he's doing. You need to make all of these not available to the public.
Yeah, I would agree with that because
Yeah,
especially when you're
because
dealing with water, because water never stays in one spot. It's
no.
there and then it's gone. So whatever you put in there is now in your neighbor's pond, and you know it's just
Yeah, I want all the products that you guys are testing me and checking me for to be restricted use products, so nobody else, the people with no education, can go just wild out with them. You know,
yeah,
that's where the problem lies. That's where the fish kills lie. That's where the overabundant. I'm not spending $198 a gallon on whatever and over applying it.
no,
You know,
you're not.
I'm my bottom line. So, like, their ideas are good in that, yes, we should have somebody looking over our shoulder, except that the general public has access to everything that we do
Right.
and is going to go grab a 5 pound bag of copper sulfate and go nuke it.
And if, in my opinion, you know, if you want to open that up to the public, then they need to have private applicators licenses
Yep.
so that you have to do the same training
Yep.
so you understand. I've had
Yeah.
people tell me when I'm spraying their ponds, they're like, "Hey, don't read the label. The label doesn't work." And I'm like, There's a couple things wrong with that. For
Yeah,
one,
oh,
the
yeah.
label didn't work. You probably did it wrong. Two, that's federally illegal. So if you don't want to read the label, that's on you, man. But they
Yeah,
checked
yeah.
me. I'm gonna follow the label.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious that the label works. Like, if you get your plant positively identified online, right? Just for guys who are out if you've made it this far, you might as well know this fact. If a biologist says, "Hey, you've got, let's just say, duckweed," that's duckweed in your pond, and you go look at the aquatic label and that chemical doesn't say duckweed on there, I don't
Don't
care
spray it.
how much you spray of it. It's not killing duckweed.
No. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars to get those labels made and approved and created. So they're pretty right. I mean,
They're
as right as they can be.
oh yeah, you'll know it real quick when you misidentify one. I've seen it a few times. Somebody thought it was this, thought it was that, bought the wrong chemical, put it out there, nothing happened. Yeah, you misid'd the plant.
Yeah, no, it's kind of scary too, because we've dealt with quite a few customers that bigger companies came in and they were like, "Hey, this is what you've got." One example was, "This is what you got. We can't spray here. You have to find someone else to spray this." So the dude called us. He told us what he had. We showed up, got out there. I'm like, "Man, you
Not
don't have milfoil. This is bladderwort. Everything we brought to spray this is
it's
not going to kill
right.
it."
Yeah.
And, so it taught me a lesson. One is, okay, send me a picture of what you got before I show up.
Yep.
But it was also like, okay, even people in our field, aquatic vegetation looks so similar that unless you really know what you're looking for, you can get it wrong. Even someone who sprays every day.
Oh, and well, as soon as you said, "I can't spray this, you need somebody else," that's the wrong help. You got the wrong man.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not gonna. We just mentioned the guys from the government at the the extension service guys. I'll say that, like, I can use that again, a real world story. I came across a job, it was about 45-acre lake. It had a plant called Water Shield, marginally.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah, a dollar bonnet. It looks like a lily pad. For anybody who doesn't know, about that big around, an oval shape.
Super slimy underneath and on the stems.
Snot
Very
bonnet.
nasty.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I call it snot bonnet for its sliminess underneath. Well, I called him up because I said, I've got a situation with Water Shield. I got to treat it, and I've got to put, I'm going to do what back then, I don't know what you guys are doing on it now. Back then, it was a granular 2,4-D was recommended for it.
It works pretty good.
Yeah, it's okay. And there's a couple other liquids I think that might have had labels for back then, but most of the time, like, the granular 2,4-D was the number one treatment for it. So I called the doctor and I said to him, I got a question on how you apply this much granular 2,4-D. Like, how did you apply 2,4-D? Like, what was your setup look like?
Right.
He's like, well, what do you mean? What did our setup look like? I was like, you've applied granular 2,4-D before, correct, sir? Oh, yes. Okay. How did you apply it? With a cup? And I said, oh, good Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
I got more. I said, think bigger. He's like, well, how much Brasinia do you have to treat? I'm like, 26 acres. And he's like, 26 acres? And I'm like, yeah, man, 26 acres. I got an aquatic weed problem. You ain't doing what I'm doing with a Dixie cup.
No. You know what I'm saying? And you're not doing it. If you're applying any granular with a cup, you're probably not doing it right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But again, here's a guy, and I'm not knocking those dudes, but again, you got a guy working in a position at the government level, at the professor level, at the extension service level, doing a great job. Brilliant guy.
Right.
But he does not have the field experience level as somebody like I would have, or like you would have, right? Because he's limited by what he's done in the position that he's in.
Right. Because all they're allowed to do is know the science to make recommendations. You can't, extension's not going to come manage your pond for you.
They ain't gonna come spread. They're not gonna come spread $10,000 worth of granular 2,4-D. I can promise you that. You know what I'm saying? Which is what I had to do.
Golly.
I ended up, doing it myself. We fabricated just a salt spreader to the front of a John boat and hooked it up on a on the four on a lit on the stupid thing you put in the truck to trailer, the trailer hitch. I
Oh
mounted
yeah,
the trailer hitch to the front of the boat, flipped the thing around, and mounted my spreader up like a trailer hitch on the front of the
and then
boat.
just applied it as you went.
Well, I kicked it out and cocked it one way, so it's kind of shot off one side and just rode that way around, and
Right.
made it happen. But dude, I was 23 years old at the time. I was looking for help on how to do an aquatic weed treatment, and I was getting back Dixie cup.
Yeah, that's
And
not a
I'm
good.
no.
You should see, man. You should see the setups. Do you know who Kelly Duffy is?
Heard the name, but not
Man,
personally.
he's like a aquatic herbicide guru, but you
Yeah,
should see the creative setups he comes up with. We're talking about applying granular herbicides. He put a hopper on a leaf blower.
yeah,
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 he
yeah.
can he
Good
can go
idea.
like 30 foot out and
Yeah,
just do
yeah.
swaths 30 foot at a time
That's a
with a
good
leaf
idea.
blower.
I've seen all kind of cool equipment now. All a bunch of unique stuff. But back in the day, that's what we had.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you got to make it work, and it did work.
yeah. And again, I'm not knocking anybody at the college or anything, but then their experience is limited, just the same way my experience is limited to, if you're looking for, again, you're looking for research projects on modern pond management techniques, man, that's not me. Now, if you need me to go out there and do some work, well, I can help you there.
Yeah.
But no papers, not really a papers kind of a guy. Can't
No,
help
well,
you.
and that's where the disparities are important because you have people doing the research and then people applying the research. You would never get anything published if the one guy had to do the research and then go out and test it. You know, I mean, they do test it for part of their research, but you know what I mean? If they had to apply it every day, you'd never get anywhere. You got to have people doing the research and then people in the field, for hire doing stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with
Yeah.
anything. You don't have plumbers, doing research on new plumbing techniques for buildings to better, improve water usage and all kinds of stuff. They're just doing the work. You've got other
Right.
people doing that.
Right. Right. It cracks me up too how many people they want to play like stump shan. Let's throw him what kind of fish is this? It's like some kind of South American catfish. I don't know.
Yeah. I've
You
had
get
people
that
ask me
stuff
that
too?
too.
Yeah.
It's like a stream killifish or something. I'm like, dude, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what that is. I
Yeah.
deal with ponds. It's the same
I'm
fish.
managing ponds, dude.
Yeah, I took
Yeah.
courses that I may have identified that at one time, but I don't remember what it is anymore.
I'm amazed at my colleagues that can remember all the fish. I don't remember them all, man. There's so
Yeah,
many of them.
it's like, man, I can tell you this: you put that in this pond, it's bait. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh is coming with a good point. Balance and measurement, man. That's right.
Yeah,
You need measurements, and
that's
that's what
one
our.
thing.
Go ahead.
People actually knowing what a healthy fish looks like is something like a truly healthy largemouth bass that is at relative weight. People would be blown away if they actually knew. I don't know how many times I see, we catch fish, we're doing an electrofishing survey, we're showing people the fish, they're watching, they want to be out there, and they're like, man, that's a healthy fish. And we're at 85% relative weight. And they're like, what?
Mm-mm.
It's streamlined, it's not sunken in, but they're like, oh, that's not where it should be. Like,
Mm-mm.
no.
Yeah.
Wow. It
Yeah.
blows their mind. And, to be honest, growing up, I fished a lot of ponds. I didn't know any better either. I caught a fish that was 3 pounds. I
Yeah.
just assumed that meant it was healthy,
Yeah. I know.
and usually
I
they're
grew up
not.
the same way. No, they're using most of our fish are not healthy anymore, and that's what brought us both on to here today.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
trying to work towards getting a healthier bass population, and sadly enough, we've got to save our bass from the people who love them the most, the bass fishermen. It's
Yeah.
ironic, but it's true.
It is. It really is. And sometimes driving home that message is even harder. Because, the two biggest myths I see with like hardcore bass fishermen are that catch and release is how you grow big fish, and vegetation is how you grow big fish.
Mm-hmm.
And neither one are true. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's variables there, obviously, and when you're on the internet, someone's going to come up with some creative situation and where one of those will apply. But
Right.
in general, more vegetation does not mean big fish, and catch and release does not mean big fish. You know, they have their place, but that's like anything else. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Yeah, well said. I agree. Like people, I see guys all the time on internet, like, oh, that look at this, look at how juicy this looks, and I'm just looking at it, going, that thing is dead. There, the water hasn't seen any sunlight in 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or people like, oh, we need to plant more hydrilla. No, no, we
no,
don't. No, we don't. Please don't.
please don't. And they just, I don't know, man. It's just like there's so much misinformation that just keeps trudging along. And I don't know, man. This is my attempt in my older age to make a difference in our fisheries. Um, I think it does. I mean, like I said, we got over 25,000 people across 3 platforms now.
Yeah. No,
And
it's a start. You can't, I mean, you got to start
right,
somewhere.
exactly, exactly.
And
And
if
I'm
you
real
can,
proud of YouTube and the come up. I've had a couple posts that have really gotten popular on there.
yeah, that's good. Hopefully the electrofishing content will help boost that and educating people on what electrofishing is. You know, like you said, a lot of the YouTubers and stuff are starting to get into electrofishing their own private ponds.
Yeah, I've seen
And
them.
some of the comments of people just like freaking out. They're like, "Oh, you're hurting all those fish," and it's,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
not really.
No, it'd be the same as like, going on to the cops TV show and you're hurting all those people with the taser.
Yeah, it's like,
Nah, taser's not gonna kill them.
temporarily, but you
It's
put them in
still,
that bucket in a few minutes, they'll be fine. Like nothing ever happened to them.
oh my god, I know. What's the most bass? What's the most you've ever got up?
Ooh, like per acre, man, we got almost 100 bass in a 1.3 acre pond
Oh,
on an
really?
electrofishing survey. So per
Wow.
acre, that's probably the most,
Yeah, yeah.
just because it was outrageous. We couldn't keep up. I mean, even with 2 guys on the front, it was like they were everywhere. You couldn't catch them.
Right. I had this one called Berkeley Lake. It was near Atlanta. It was about almost a 100-acre lake, and the closest thing to a highland reservoir that I ever managed. It was deep and steep and clear, and like just this little miniature version of Lake Lanier in a pretty affluent community there near Berkeley Lake's real nice. It's a nice place. But the bass were stunted for so many years, and so I finally, after a few years I managed that place for about 15 years, but after probably 4 years or so, I finally had enough meetings and talked everybody into letting me harvest some bass out of it. So I did with the shock rig, you know.
Yeah,
Um, I took over 200 pounds of bass out of that lake 10 times in a row,
that's insane. That's a
and
lot.
then didn't even.
Make a dent.
And I mean, and then did it for years too. I mean, I harvested and harvested and harvested and harvested. I found a local fish supplier guy who would take them, and we could sell them. I'm sure we were just reselling them to people who were stocking them into a stunted population again. You know what I mean? But
Probably.
I had so many of them that I thought, well, selling them is better than throwing them in a ditch, you know?
Yeah. And
And
you can
so I
only eat so many fish before you're tired of it.
That's exactly. I mean, I gave enough away to got rid of as many as I could. And then just when I took that job on, I knew what I was into, and then called Randy and was like, I'm going to have a lot of adult bass for sale for
And
the
he
next
was
couple
probably
of years.
like, "Bring them on."
Oh,
At
we made money.
$18 a pound?
Oh
Yeah, buddy.
yeah. We made money, dude. We made so much money. Um, but at the same time, I mean, I was it's just like on all things fisheries. Did you help your client? Did you ended up improving the bass fishing at the 90-acre lake? Yes. But then did you, to remove all those fish and take them and sell them, did you make money? Yes, I did very good that year financially. But all those fish collectively, that where they went everywhere in the area, didn't help anybody's pond where they went.
No, but
So
you can't make people not buy those fish. I mean, they were gonna buy them anyway, whether it was
exactly. Well,
from
yeah,
you or someone else.
probably.
Because if you're buying adult bass from a fish hatchery, they're gonna be stunted pretty much no matter what you do.
Yeah, Kevin
So
Atwell, he brings up a really interesting point, and we can tie this back into what you brought up earlier in the stream. Ray Scott, actually, Ray Scott was really smart about. He had private ponds and lakes at his property, and the guy you mentioned at the beginning, Lusk, managed him. He knew Ray, and Ray Scott knew very well that harvest was important on smaller bodies of water because Bob Lusk was his consultant.
yeah, yeah,
So what you have to realize is those guys are also in a situation where catch and release got started as a public relations problem. You know, they would go have fishing tournaments in the late 70s, early 80s and kill vast numbers of big dead fish floating everywhere
right.
because they have poor fish handling. Hell, they still don't do a very good job handling the fish, in my opinion, at their fishing tournaments. But back
No,
then, it was really bad, and that's what got catch and release going, was the killing of the fish, the mishandling of the fish, and so it became a big public relations problem for tournament bass fishermen, and that's where all this catch and release stuff came from. It didn't come from us. It didn't come from science.
no, yeah, no, it didn't. And you can, if you do research on that, you'll find that out. You know, there's articles and stuff over it. Yeah, like you said, it was because of poor fish handling. It wasn't even
Mm-mm,
over harvesting or anything. It was just
mm-mm.
people were catching fish and removing the slime coat because they would leave them on their boat or they'd put them in their live well too long or, what have you. And I believe it's MLF, Major League Fishing. They're kind of trying to change how it's done. I'm pretty sure they have like an official scale on each boat. So when you catch a fish, it's automatically weighed and measured,
Yeah, they do.
and then they release that fish. So it's
Right there too, which I like
better.
the idea of that too. Yeah, I like the
It's
idea
yeah,
of
not
MLF.
to say that you can't still mishandle the fish, but you're giving it a better shot by mishandling it and putting it right back versus mishandling it, leaving it in a live well for 2 hours with
Right.
high ammonia, nitrates, whatever, and then putting it back.
Well, I also noticed that MLF is one of the only people that I've noticed have advertised having a scientist as an advisor anywhere. You know, they got
Yeah,
Steve Arden over there.
Stephen Barden, yeah.
Yeah, I like Steve. I learn stuff from him every time I watch him. You know, I think he does a great job.
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I've
I
I've
don't either.
known of him for a while. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah. I just know like of the stuff that I see him doing online and stuff. That's the only way I know him, but he does a great job. And I would imagine that, that's probably some of his ideas going into what's going on at MLF.
Yeah, I'm sure because not any of the other major tournaments do that yet. I'm sure they'll follow suit once they've, because Major League Fishing is going to show pretty good results with because they try to keep data on everything too.
Right.
So they're going to show pretty good results, and I imagine probably 5 years down the line or whatever, when everyone else catches on, they'll follow suit as well. But
I wish
maybe,
I could. The one thing that I could do, I could say to it. I mean, you could turn this into a big argument and pointing fingers and blaming and all this kind of stuff, which get us nowhere. The one thing that I would say to pro fishing, if they were watching this, slightly change the way you measure the fish. You're already taking the weights, right?
right?
Just take the relative weights. Yeah, you got your total weight, but give me a weight per fish and an inches per fish. So all the fish that you catch can be converted to data.
Right.
So then when you're looking at the board at the end of the tournament and you see this team caught this many pounds of fish. I want to be able to look over and see the average relative weight of all the fish caught. What was the relative weights of your 14-inch fish? What was the relative weights of your 15-inch fish? I guarantee you, if they just changed the way that they measured a little bit, added that relative weight calculation, and let those guys see, holy crap, look how poor the 13 to 15-inch size class is in our lake. Let it
Yeah,
be right up there on the board. That would change everything for us right there.
I agree. And, the state, give that data to the state too. I mean, they need all the help they can get. They've got
Exactly.
crews of 4 people that have to take care of 20 lakes. So
Exactly.
every 4 years is when they're doing their surveys. If you can give them data annually, even if it's just
Just to
50
catch
data
data
points,
from your
something.
tournaments. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? You know how many data points that adds to your science that you're collecting every season? So I would like to see the tournament guys, like I said, they don't have to change anything they're doing, but the way that they measure the fish so that the fish can now become usable scientific data that you
yeah.
caught.
And they already have the information. It's easy to just
Yeah.
convert it, use
Yeah.
it for something.
And I know for me especially too, when you write it down, and that's what I preach to people on here all the time. When you take these, I got my little relative weight chart right here, right? And I weigh out my fish, my, whatever, my 17-inch fish, and it weighs out to be 2.7 pounds. Write that down on a sheet of paper. Write 20 or 30. Write every bass you catch out next year. Write the length, write the weight, and calculate its relative weight. And when you have that list of data, when you're sitting there looking at it, you see your pond in a whole different way.
Right. It's just getting people to do that. It's hard.
It
It's really
is.
hard to do that
It is. It's really
because
hard.
they don't want to take the time to. And I get it. It does take a little bit of time. If you're catching fish fast, you want to keep catching fish fast. But if you want to keep that up for the long term, you kind of got to know what condition those fish are in.
Right.
So, it's you gotta give and take when you want to, make sacrifices.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's hard to get people to listen in general. That's why having data and showing proof,
Right.
through videos and stuff, and say, look, this is what happens, is a good thing.
Yeah.
We
I
try
had
to.
some experience with this before, and exactly what you're saying. And it's what I say here, what we can sit here and say, I saw this and I saw that and I electrofished this and I did that. All that stuff's meaningless. Like there's a few
Right.
people, the 11 guys listening, that's meaning something to them. Um, and a few other people, but for the general public, it's the video. You got to show it, you
Right.
know. And that again, going beat a dead horse, but going having Sugar Hill and having the availability to show. Do you have any ponds like that? Do you have any new stuff that you can track like that?
We're about to starting this year. We have a lot of new ones. Most of what we've gotten over the last year or so is a lot of just cookie cutter bass. I mean,
Right,
they're the same one after another,
right.
but we're gonna have 5 or 6. We already have planned new projects that are all 5 acres or greater,
Oh,
and
nice.
they're gonna be started over from the beginning. Some are brand new, but yeah,
Yeah.
they're gonna be started from the beginning so that we can show this is what your bass should look like.
Right, right. No, that'll be great, valuable information for you. And I think too, because over the years, and I've been doing it now, I've got guys all over the country now who are like had their own ponds and didn't even know, they just started doing it, you know,
Right.
started tinkering, then fell down the rabbit hole of pond management, read the right stuff, got the extensions publications and asked questions and have been working in the field at it and are seeing results. And that's where you really start making a difference. When people start holding their results in their hands, when their kids start holding bigger fish, when they start holding bigger fish, that's when you start gaining the ground.
Exactly. And yeah, the thing I feel worst for is people that they mean well, they have good intentions, they don't know where to go to find information, and then they go to a fish farm or a bait farm and they get these stocking recommendations that are just designed because they want to sell fish to them.
Sell fish, right?
And then later they're like, man, my fish aren't growing right. And, they call us and they're like, hey, what happened here? And like, oh, well, what'd you stock in it? You know, they're like, oh, I bought these fish, and they show you, and you're just like, who
Which,
sold you that? Why do you have 1,000 catfish per acre? What are
yeah,
you doing?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and
because somebody wanted to sell 1,000 catfish.
exactly. I've
Yeah,
seen that one wasn't a personal like client that came to us, but I saw that in one of those Facebook groups.
yeah,
They were like, "Hey, you know, what do y'all think about these stocking recommendations? I feel like we have issues with our fish." And yeah, the
yeah,
bait farm recommended them 500 to 1,500 catfish per acre. I was like, "You better get some fish out quick, or they're
yeah,
all going to be dead." I don't.
yeah. I've seen that many times over the years. It's amazing how people can exist that way sometimes, but they really can. Some people can sell anything to anyone. I don't know how that works,
Yeah,
but
or it'll be 300 bluegill an acre and 150 bass, and
yeah,
they do it all at the same time, and it's like,
yeah, it's like, man, this thing is screwed.
yeah. Well, and you feel bad for people because they genuinely they want good information, and that's why they came to a place that sells fish because you think you would get good information. And not to say that all of them are like that, but there are a lot of them that give really bad advice and
Yeah,
really bad stocking rates
yeah,
to people that don't know any better
yeah.
and don't know right away if you don't know any better when you come up there and ask questions and they're gonna be like, "Yep, they don't even know what a bluegill looks like. I'm gonna sell them whatever I want to." You know?
Pretty much. I've also noticed too, it seems like that there is this natural tendency for people to want to stock more fish. So if
Right,
you stock the fish and there's a just a natural tendency of people's logic and there's a problem with the fish, then you need to stock more fish.
right.
So they get, and that's another reason why I'm doing what I'm doing at the pond. I haven't stocked any fish since the original stocking intentionally. Could I? Yeah, I could go throw some shad in or do whatever. Absolutely. And Clint would pay for it and he'd do all that stuff too. But that's not the point. The point is, look, we stocked it once, we stocked it right, the fish are growing.
Yeah, exactly, and adding that was the big lake I was telling you about with the crappie issue. That was the crappie weren't growing above 10 inches or, you know, a vast majority weren't, and
Normal,
the
yeah.
assumption was that it was a genetics problem, so every year crappie were getting added in, and I was like,
Oh
"No, no,
no,
no.
no.
What? You're making
What?
the problem worse." And
Yeah.
I still haven't convinced the guy that was doing it that
It
that's
was
the problem.
not a genetics problem. Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah,
just the same thing with the bass. Oh, your bass aren't growing. Let's put some Florida bass in it. It's like that's not going to work either. You know,
yeah.
it's not genetic,
Hopefully, they'll all get eaten when you put them in there.
right? Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and that's the hard part is most even the clients that are paying you to do your job, most of them aren't listening to you. Most
Right.
of them are going online and reading in their forums and talking with their buddies, and they're all involved in it. And I did everything that I did here is calculated.
Right. There's a reason
Yeah,
behind what you're doing, not just,
everything. Yeah,
well,
like
that's what I read. There's
for
scientific basis for it.
I'm talking about from a social media standpoint. Like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, like I know for a fact I will get engagement talking about this stuff.
Yeah, because
I
people are
also
gonna wanna
know for a
argue with
fact
you.
it's the least profitable thing you're gonna do in the field as businessmen like us. Like you could literally cut the fisheries part out of most people's pond management business and it won't be missed. You just
Yeah,
keep
that's
spraying, you
not
just
most of your
keep
money.
dredging, you just keep doing your thing over there. You keep making your money over there and don't even worry about fish. You know what I'm talking
Exactly.
about? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of companies that that's all they do is
Yeah.
vegetation. They don't mess with
No.
fish.
No, most of them don't. Most of them around here don't. I've
Yeah,
had
it's like
3
50-50 in
different guys
Texas.
I've gone and looked at ponds in Central Florida that had treatment companies that they called in and said, "Hey, what's going on with my fish population?" "I don't know. We don't do that." They
Yeah,
come out, they do the treatments, they leave. That's it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's usually that's because you don't there's a lot of not that there's not a lot of science in spraying and mechanical removal because there is, but there's seems to be you can get away with less science. Like when it comes to fisheries management and balancing the there's a whole lot of work that goes in for less reward. Like,
Mhm.
like you said, you're not going to get rich electrofishing, but
Mm-mm.
if you want to fix somebody's pond, it's going to take a lot of work to do that and a lot of thought process and stuff. It doesn't take a lot for, and especially the way some companies operate is, oh, is it on this label? Yeah, well, then we're going to use this.
Yeah.
That doesn't take a lot. That's not as hard to do. If you
No.
want to get complex and understand how those herbicides work in a plant and all that stuff, which is great to know and what you should know, but a lot of people don't know that and they still run a business and make a lot of money.
Oh,
So,
absolutely, yeah. I've had guys that know what I feel like is a lot less about me about this subject make a lot more money than me in pond management, a lot more money than I ever thought about making.
right.
But they also lived in different areas of the country. Different places are different. Every place is a little bit different. I know like around North Carolina and that part of the country, that's a real good place for pond management business. Atlanta and Georgia is not as you would think that there's more work in North Carolina because of the way the individual cities manage stormwater regulations. They're
Right. So there's a lot
much
of
stricter in
stormwater
North
work.
Carolina than they are in Atlanta, Georgia, because of the way the hurricanes flow, probably.
Right. And we get a lot of work in that sector with trucksters and stuff like that. That's where a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
those shine because they're like, man, we're getting fined now.
Yep.
We got to get this stuff out of here. So
Yep.
spraying,
Nope.
that doesn't help you. It's got
Nope.
to be gone now.
On now. Yep. And it depends on the inspector.
Right.
Each individual place is a little bit different, has a different person. Like one guy lets one thing slide, one guy does not,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Well, and
But yeah,
usually they let those get so bad to where, they don't do anything to it until they get
until,
fined and then they're like, "Oh crap, now we got to spend money."
yep, that's exactly right. But those types of laws, environmental regulations and stuff can drive, the fundamental part of your business.
Right. Yeah,
So
no, it
it's an
definitely can.
important thing to be aware of, especially as somebody at your age and how, I mean, if you just want to make it political, just simple politics, the most pond management work were in the most liberal cities that had the strictest environmental regulations.
Yeah, especially for
North Carolina,
chemical
you can
free.
name them. You know why you can name them though? That's where the colleges are.
Right.
Wilmington, Duke, Raleigh, Chapel Hill. All those places were gangster money for pond management because all those professors were out in those living in those towns and passing those laws, getting involved in their local, stuff like that.
Yeah,
And you
and
know what?
then
No, you're not using chemical. There's like I remember like around Duke, there was a law in like the city of Duke. You don't even use herbicides in stormwater retention ponds.
yeah, so there
You
you go. Now you need a
nope.
truckster.
Now you know what you're going to do? You're going to get a guy, 20 guys with weed whackers and go in there and get all that out. And it's going to be a quarterly issue. And
Yep.
the guy who owns the store is just going to have to pay for it. And that's just how the world works right there. But absolutely zero of that businesses exists in Georgia. They
Yeah,
don't.
Georgia's a little looser.
Oh, wow. Why do you think I sold?
Yeah, I've never
Yeah.
I've never been to Georgia, man. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm gonna learn
No, man.
here in
They're
a few
like,
months.
every once in a while you'll find somebody catching a fine on a stormwater pond, but it ain't rare. It's rare there. In other states, they're looking to write you a ticket. There's a
Right.
big difference in how you make money just on those two things right there.
Especially when it comes to vegetation management. That's the other thing. People care a lot more about what their in general, there's more people that care about what their pond looks like than what the fish look like. If there's
Thanks.
fish in it, that's cool with them. But if there's algae on it, nope,
Yeah.
that ain't gonna fly.
Yeah.
So, that's where the money comes in is people don't like, especially people with a lot of money, they usually don't like things to look bad. So they're willing to shell out money for vegetation control before they'll shell out fish. They don't see the fish, they don't care.
Exactly. That's how I made a living in those homeowners association ponds and apartments and the
Yeah,
neighborhoods,
especially HOAs.
Yeah,
They don't care
HOAs,
about fish.
they were gravy, man. As long as you showed up, did your job, gave them a report. HOAs, I didn't have a trouble. I did a lot of business with those guys.
Yeah, the only time you run into problems is if there's people that don't live on the lake and they don't want to pay for it. So then they're like, "Man, this is our budget," but they don't want to spend it. So can you come give a presentation? You know, you have to keep
dude,
giving presentations to get people on board that
doing
you're not.
HOA presentations reminds me of taking comments online on social media.
Oh man, I've
It's
done a
about the
few
same
and
thing.
they're chaotic. Every one of them is the same. There's a
Yeah,
lot of people that are like, everything you say is gold. They're like on board with it. And then you've got like a smaller portion that are like, they will argue with you until they're blue in the face. They, even if they have nothing to stand on, it's just they don't want to spend the money, so you should go away.
I'm right and you're wrong, and that's the way this is going to be.
Yeah, but they would be the first ones to complain when the lake looks bad.
Oh
So it's
yeah,
like you can't have it both ways. You
oh yeah.
gotta,
They try though.
yeah, yeah. No, they do.
That's funny. Well, we're at 2 hours and 24 minutes, and we've covered most everything on my list of stuff that I wrote down.
I didn't make a list of stuff. I was just
You
along
didn't?
for the ride. I was like, man, whatever we talk about, I'm cool with.
Yeah, I
So
figured that's the way it would go. We'll do it again too, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been a good one.
yeah, it has. I didn't
Plug your
realize you.
comment, plug your business, and where people can reach you at the end of this thing.
Okay, I don't know how to actually.
Okay, just contact me and I'll get you in touch with Garrett.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know how. It won't let me make a comment. I guess because I'm not technically signed into YouTube through this web browser, so it won't
Oh,
actually
yeah,
let me comment in the channel.
it won't. Okay, so there's something new we learned. Let's see if I can do it. I'll copy everything. It'll go to the description, right?
Yeah,
And
that.
and is that what they call it in YouTube? The description box. We'll copy the website and do you want your personal Instagram or do you have a business Instagram that you guys use or
We have a business Facebook. I don't actually know if we have a business Instagram. We don't post on it if we do. You can put my personal
I didn't
Instagram
see
on
it.
there if you want
Okay.
to, but the Facebook works too.
That's
The
cool.
Pristine Pond Solutions Facebook page.
Pristine Pond Solutions. And like we stated earlier, these guys are going to come out and help me with a shock survey. We're going to do a couple shocking jobs in Georgia. So if you guys want to get on that schedule, I do have one guy out of South Carolina who might be interested. I talked to the other day.
Okay.
And I'll just start throwing up a post about it once a week or so for the next couple months.
Yeah, we'll do the same thing. I mean, really, if you're anywhere between Central Texas and North Georgia, we
Yeah,
can fit you in. Louisiana, Mississippi, we're coming all the way through. So,
right.
and we go to
Also,
Mississippi a lot anyway. But
yeah, I'll throw a shout out to the guys over in at Mossy Oak. They might have something going over there in West Point.
okay.
Never know.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we're making a fun trip out of it, so
yeah,
I'm
that'll be cool. That'll be
all on
cool.
board.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Hopefully, we can get a bunch of work across through there for you guys and build that part of your business. I know it's a small part of the business to build. You
Yeah,
know,
but it's the fun part. That's the part that I like to do. I do most of the well, I do all the spraying and a lot of the fish management, but I like the fish management better.
me
Obviously,
too.
most people would agree with that.
Just like I said earlier, man, we could sit here and we would not have 10 people looking at this if we were talking about spraying ponds the whole time.
No, but there's a lot of people that want their pond sprayed
There it is.
compared to fish.
That gets opens up like we said, there's so many cans of worms, so many different things, so much different water chemistry and stuff that I don't see anybody getting real elaborate. You're going to need a pro to help you with that. You know, once you get into like doing your own treatments,
Yeah, it's complicated. It's a lot
it
more
is.
complicated than people think it is
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do it right.
I could walk you through it in Georgia on a couple different types of plants, but for the most part, just hire the dude, let him
Yeah.
pay the man his money, let him get his job done and try to use grass carp if you can, really. That
Yeah,
helps.
it'll save you money in the long run to have someone do it who knows what they're doing and do it right the first time than to try over and over and over again yourself and not get the results. And then, the longer you let it sit, the more expensive it's going to be. So if you got
Right.
a problem that you want to deal with it before it's 50%, 100% all the way
That's
covering your pond.
that's really good advice. That everybody should pay attention to. Don't let the pond get choked out. There's where your problems are going to lie.
Yeah, it's going to be expensive to fix it too.
Yep. Always more expensive to fix as well. All good points, my friend. Well, at 2.5 hours, we're going to end it on you guys, but appreciate everybody watching. And we'll be back with Garrett before the shocking job, I'm sure. But I appreciate you coming on and testing this out with me today, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It was fun. We covered a lot, and I'm sure there will be more to cover next time.
Oh, yeah. We got plenty more. Like I said, man, we'll never run out of content.
No, never will.
It'll never be boring here. All right, buddy. I appreciate everything, and I will talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.